Today's story starts at a family cookout. 6-year-old kid running around, playing tag, sharing his juice box with strangers, being a complete angel. His grandmother looks at the kid's dad from across the potato salad, smiles and says, "Next time, maybe just don't bring him." 23 adults at that table. Not one said a single word. But then a 13-year-old girl pushed her chair back. What came out of that girl's mouth is the reason I'm still thinking about this story 3 days later. Stick around. My mom told me not to bring my son to her family cookout. So I cut off the money, went no contact, and let her read her own words back to her. My name's Cal. I'm 34. I live in Dayton with my 2 kids. Lily, who's 13 going on 45, and Finn, who just turned 6 and has been completely obsessed with dinosaurs since roughly the moment he learned they existed. Like, not casually interested. This kid knows the difference between a Brachiosaurus and a Camarasaurus and will correct you if you get it wrong. I work as an operations coordinator at a medical supply company, 3 days in the office, 2 remote. I'm not rich. I'm comfortable enough that a flat tire doesn't ruin me, but I'm not eating at steakhouses every other weekend either. You know exactly what I mean. Now, before any of this makes sense, you need to understand who my mom is. Her name's Gloria, and Gloria is one of those people who delivers cruelty with a smile. She doesn't yell, doesn't throw things. She's quieter than that, the kind of person who compliments you and then adds a line that makes your chest cave in. You look good, Cal. It's brave of you to go that route. She runs every relationship in her life like she's the sun, and everyone around her is just supposed to keep orbiting. Anyone who stops orbiting gets labeled difficult, ungrateful, or emotionally unstable. My dad, Ron, figured out sometime in his first decade of marriage that agreeing with Gloria is just easier than pushing back. I don't even blame him anymore. That man has been nodding for 37 years. I'm pretty sure he forgot he's allowed to have opinions. That's a whole separate conversation, though. Here's what you need to know about the money situation, because this is important context. For years, I was quietly holding this family together financially. Not huge amounts, but steady, reliable, every time. When my parents' furnace broke 2 winters ago, I sent the $1,200. When my dad needed new tires and they were behind on their insurance, that was me too. When my mom wanted to throw herself a birthday dinner at a steakhouse and conveniently forgot her wallet at home, 3 guesses who covered it. I never said a word about any of it, just did it, because that's what you do for your people, right? You help because they're family, and someday, when you need them, they'll show up for you. Except they never did. The one time, I asked Gloria to watch Finn for a weekend, so I could take Lily to a volleyball tournament in Columbus. My mom said she was too tired. Finn is genuinely one of the easiest kids alive. He watches his cartoons, eats whatever you put in front of him, and goes to bed at 8:30 without a single argument. But she was too tired. Then that same weekend I saw on Facebook that she hosted a card game night at her house for 6 of her friends and made 3 different kinds of dip. 3 kinds of dip, too tired for her own grandson, but fully capable of hosting an event with handmade appetizers. That stung. I swallowed it. I always swallowed it. Let me tell you about my cousin Jess, because she matters in this story. She's actually my mom's sister's daughter, lives about 40 minutes away in Springfield. Jess and I have been close our whole lives. She's definitely the only person in this entire family who ever looked me in the eye and said, "Cal, you don't have to keep doing this." She saw exactly how my mom treated me, like a cash machine with feelings, and she never pretended otherwise. Every time I called her frustrated after some backhanded comment Gloria made, Jess would say, "Write it down. One day you'll need to remember exactly why you stopped." I should have listened to her a lot sooner than I did. Okay. The picnic. It was 4th of July weekend, and my Aunt Brenda, that's Jess's mom, organized a big family cookout out at Eastwood Metro Park. The whole crew showed up. Uncles, aunts, second cousins I hadn't seen since somebody's wedding back in 2019. Kids everywhere, burgers on the grill. Somebody brought a speaker playing old Motown. Honestly, it was a pretty nice afternoon for about the first 2 hours. Finn was being an absolute angel. He was out there playing tag with Jess's boys, chasing them around the picnic area. He shared his juice box with a little girl he didn't know at all. And when he scraped his knee on the sidewalk near the parking lot, he didn't even cry. He just walked over to me, lifted up his shorts leg, showed me the scrape and said, "Dad, I think I need a dinosaur Band-Aid." I mean, come on. But Gloria had been watching him all afternoon with this look on her face. You know the look, like she bit into something that tasted wrong and she's trying to be polite about it. Every single time Finn ran past her chair, she'd exhale this little sigh. When he bumped the edge of a folding table and a cup of lemonade tipped over, onto the grass, not onto anyone, just the grass. And honestly, it was a paper cup, so like, 0 damage, which made her reaction even more dramatic. She said loud enough for half the table to hear, "This is exactly why. This is exactly why." I didn't even know what she meant, and I didn't ask. I just cleaned up the lemonade, told Finn to be a little more careful, and sat back down. Then dinner happened. We're all eating. Finn's sitting next to Lily on a bench that's a little too tall for him, so his legs are swinging, which is just what 6-year-olds do. He's got ketchup on his chin. He's whispering something to Lily about a dinosaur thing, being completely normal. And then Gloria puts her fork down, looks at me across the table, and smiles. She always smiles when she does this, and says, "Cal, next time maybe just don't bring the kid. It would be easier for everyone." The whole table went silent. I mean actually silent, like someone muted the park. My Aunt Brenda looked straight down at her plate. My Uncle Ray got suddenly very focused on his corn on the cob. My dad grabbed his water and stared at the sky like he was watching for something up there. 23 adults. Not one said a word. And Finn heard it. He's 6, not deaf. He looked up at me with those big brown eyes, ketchup still on his chin, and he whispered, "Dad, does Grandma not want me here?" I opened my mouth. I was going to say something. Something measured, something polite, something designed to keep the peace. Because that's what I always did. Keep the peace, swallow it, smooth it over, keep everyone comfortable at the cost of yourself. But before I could get a word out, Lily put her burger down. My 13-year-old daughter, who had been sitting there quietly the whole afternoon, put her burger down, wiped her hands on her napkin, pushed her chair back from the table, and stood up. She looked directly at my mother and said, calm, steady, not yelling, just completely certain. "Say that again." The whole table froze. My Aunt Brenda's hand stopped halfway to her mouth and just hung there. Gloria looked at Lily like she genuinely couldn't believe what she was hearing. There was this little laugh, the dismissive one she does, and she said, "Lily, sit down. This is an adult conversation." And Lily said, "Then stop acting like a child." I'm pretty sure my Uncle Ray actually choked on his corn. But here's where it got complicated, because Gloria doesn't lose arguments, and she especially doesn't lose them to teenagers. She looked at me, not at Lily, at me, and said, "This is what happens when you don't teach your children respect." And I felt that familiar pull in my chest. That old weight telling me to apologize, to smooth it over, to grab Lily's arm and say, "Honey, sit down, it's fine. Keep the peace. Protect the table. Protect the moment. Protect everyone except myself." But something was different this time. Maybe it was watching Finn's face when she said it. Maybe it was seeing my own daughter stand up and do what I'd been too scared to do for my entire adult life. Maybe I was just finally genuinely tired in a way I couldn't push down anymore. Whatever it was, I looked at my mother and I said, "Gloria, Finn is your grandson. And if you can't treat him like family, I don't see why I should keep treating you like mine." Then I packed up both my kids, the potato salad I'd brought, and whatever dignity I had left, and I walked to the car. Hold on, let me jump in here because I need everyone to actually count what just happened. 23 adults at that table, uncles, aunts, cousins, people who've known this man and his kids for years. His own father right there. And nobody said a word. You know what that reminds me of? That scene in every mob movie where someone says something terrible and the whole table just goes quiet and starts looking at their food. Except in those movies, at least somebody's scared of actual consequences. Here, they were scared of an awkward car ride home. Only person who passed the test was a 13-year-old in a volleyball shirt. Spoiler, it was the 8th grader. The drive home was quiet. Lily sat in the back seat staring out the window. Finn fell asleep holding his dinosaur toy before we even got to the highway. I drove with both hands on the wheel and my mom's voice running on a loop in my head. Next time, don't bring the kid. Next time, don't bring the kid. Over and over like a song you hate but can't stop hearing. When I pulled into the driveway, I didn't get out right away. I just sat there with the engine off and the windows down, listening to the crickets, and I thought about how many times I'd driven home from a family thing feeling exactly this way. That same knot in my stomach every single time. Pulling into that same driveway. That answer scared me more than anything else that happened at the park. After I got the kids to bed, I called Jess. She picked up on the first ring, which tells you everything you need to know about her. I went through the whole thing. Every word Gloria said, every look she gave, every person who stared at their plate and said nothing. When I was done, Jess said, "Cal, you have been writing checks for people who wouldn't give you a glass of water if you were on fire. When are you going to stop?" I was standing in my kitchen at 11 at night, still smelling like sunscreen and charcoal from the cookout, and I said, "Tonight. I'm stopping tonight." Now here's what stopping actually looked like, because it wasn't some big announcement. No Facebook post, no group text. I just stopped. Quietly. Completely. The first test came 9 days later. Gloria called me. Not to apologize, obviously, because that would require believing she did something wrong. She called to tell me the water heater was making a strange noise, and my dad thought it might need replacing. And then she did the thing she always does. She didn't ask for money directly. She's too good for that. She just painted the picture. "I don't know what we're going to do, Cal. Your father's only working part-time right now, and my knees have been so bad I can barely make it to the store. I just don't know." Then silence. That heavy, loaded silence designed to make me say, "Don't worry, Mom, I'll take care of it." Instead, I said, "That sounds really stressful. I hope you guys figure it out." The pause on the other end was so long, I actually checked to see if the call dropped. It hadn't. She just didn't know what to do with a version of me that wasn't reaching for his wallet. She tried again 2 days later. Electric bill was higher than expected because of the AC. Same script, same sighing, same heavy silence. I said, "That's tough, Mom. Maybe call the electric company and ask about a payment plan." I could almost hear her brain short-circuiting through the phone. I'm not going to pretend it felt good. Part of me wanted to just send the money and make it easy, because when you've been the family fixer for that many years, it becomes your identity. You don't even know who you are without the fixing. But Jess kept me steady. She texted me every single morning. Little messages. Day 12 of choosing yourself. Keep going. Or just, "You are not an ATM. You are not an ATM. You are not an ATM." That woman deserves a long vacation and an award. Pause for a second. This is me, not Cal. Because I want to name exactly what Gloria was doing on those phone calls. She never asked directly. She just described the situation, the broken heater, the bad knees, the silence, and let the guilt do the heavy lifting. That's not asking. That's emotional engineering. She'd been running that play so long she forgot that it only works when the other person agrees to stay in the script. Cal finally put the script down. And here's the thing about people who've been running that game for years. When the audience walks out, they don't adapt. They recruit. Which is exactly what happened next. Because when the money stopped flowing, the phone calls started. Not from Gloria, though. Gloria doesn't fight her own battles when she can build an army to do it for her. First was Aunt Brenda. She called me on a Tuesday afternoon while I was at work and left a voicemail that was genuinely about 4 minutes long. The short version, I was being selfish, family helps family, and even though she didn't raise me, if she had, I would know better. Brenda didn't raise me, that's accurate. She also didn't show up to a single school event, never babysat once, never contributed a penny to anything in my life. But sure, Brenda, tell me all about family values. Then came my mom's friend Carol. A woman I have spoken to maybe 6 times in my entire life called me to say she'd heard I was abandoning my parents, and that I should really think about the example I was setting for my children. This is the same Carol who I once watched pocket a centerpiece from a church potluck. She's now my parenting consultant. The nerve on this woman. Some days I almost caved. I'll be straight with you about that. Not every day, but some of them. The ones where Brenda had just called, or when I saw a bill that stressed me out, or when I just got tired of the noise. Some of those days, the easier path felt really appealing. But then Finn came home from school about 3 weeks after the picnic and sat down at the kitchen table while I was making dinner. He was doing that thing little kids do when they're working up to saying something. opening and closing his mouth like a little fish, glancing over at me, then looking away. Finally, he looked up and said, "Dad, am I bad?" I put the spatula down, turned off the stove, sat down right next to him. "Why would you even ask me that, buddy?" He said, "Because Grandma doesn't like me, so I thought maybe I'm bad." My 6-year-old was sitting at the kitchen table genuinely trying to figure out what he did wrong. This kid who shares his snacks with every kid at school. This kid who draws pictures of our family with everyone smiling and makes sure to draw the moon too, because the moon probably wants to be included. This kid who said, "Excuse me," to a mannequin at Target last month because he accidentally bumped into it. He thought he was the problem. I held him as tight as I could and told him he was the best thing that ever happened to me, and that sometimes grown-ups have problems that have absolutely nothing to do with kids. He seemed okay after that, went back to his room, back to his dinosaurs, back to being 6. But I went into the bathroom, closed the door behind me, and sat on the floor. I cried harder than I have in years. That's when I made the second decision. The first was cutting off the money. The second one was bigger. I decided I wasn't going to any more family events. No Sunday dinners, no holidays, no cookouts, nothing. Until Gloria apologized to Finn. Not to me. To him specifically. She needed to look that little boy in the eye and tell him she was sorry, that she loved him, and that he did nothing wrong. That was the condition. Non-negotiable. I called her and said exactly that. You know what she said? "You're going to punish me over a joke." A joke. My kid sitting at the kitchen table asking if he's a bad person. That's apparently the punchline. "A joke," she said. I said, "Then it should be easy to apologize for." She hung up on me. "Okay, wait. It was just a joke." That's the defense she landed on. That's the play. This woman waited until there were 23 witnesses, picked the exact moment everyone was settled into dinner, and said, "Next time, don't bring the kid," across a full table of potato salad. That's not a joke. That's a verdict delivered with a smile. Here's the thing about the just joking move. It only gets deployed when the plan was deliberate, but the consequences were bigger than expected. You don't accidentally script a line like that. She had it in her pocket all afternoon. Captain No Accountability out here doing crowd work at the family reunion. That's when the real war started. Because Gloria told everyone her version of events. And in her version, I was the ungrateful son who cut off his struggling parents over a little comment at a barbecue. She left out Finn entirely. Left out the years of money. Left out every single detail that put her in a bad light. My cousin Jess tried to set the record straight with a few people, but you know how it goes. Whoever gets there first wins the narrative. Aunt Brenda called again. Uncle Ray sent me a text that just said, "Family first, Cal." Easy for him to say. I have never once seen Ray contribute anything to my parents financially. But sure, Ray, family first. Then my dad called. It was Tuesday. Wait, no, it was actually Wednesday. I remember because I was working from home and had a call I had to step away from to pick up. Anyway, Ron isn't a bad man. He's just a weak one. He said, "Cal, can't you just let this go? Your mother didn't mean anything by it. She's been really upset for weeks." She's been upset. My son is at home thinking he's defective, and she's the one who's been upset. I said, "Dad, I love you, but you were sitting right there. You heard exactly what she said. You saw Finn's face right after she said it. And you grabbed your water and looked at the sky." I paused. "I'm not angry at you, but I can't pretend that was okay, and I need you to understand that." He went quiet. Then he said something I didn't expect. I know I should have said something. That was the most honest thing Ron had said to me in probably a decade. For a second, just a second, I thought maybe he'd be the one to turn this around. But Gil is Gil. Actually, wait, Ron is Ron. Old habits run deep, and going along with Gloria is still just easier for him than anything else. Meanwhile, Lily was watching all of this from the sidelines, and she misses nothing. That kid sees everything. She hears the phone calls from the other room. She reads the vibe when I'm tense. She noticed me closing my eyes and taking a breath before picking up certain calls. One evening, she came into my room and sat on the edge of my bed, arms crossed, and said, "Dad, I want you to know, what I did at the picnic, I'd do it again every single time. I looked at this girl. Messy bun, algebra notebook on her lap, chipped nail polish on 3 fingers. And I thought, when did she get braver than me? I said, Lily, you shouldn't have to fight battles for your brother. She said, I'm not fighting battles for him. I'm fighting battles with you. Try to tell me that's not the most incredible kid alive. Just try. Let me jump in real quick. For anyone listening, this is me, not the story. Because I need that line to actually land. She's 13. She's got volleyball practice and homework and a whole life happening. And this kid sat on her dad's bed, looked him in the eye and said, I'm fighting battles with you. Not for him. With him. That's not just a good kid. That's the direct product of watching a parent stay calm and composed under pressure for years and deciding to become the same thing. If Cal needed any more reason to hold the line, his daughter just handed it to him. Anyway, things are about to get a whole lot worse before they get better. Stay with me. About 5 weeks after the picnic, Lily came home from school acting different. Not upset, just distracted. She kept checking her phone and immediately flipping it face down on the table. If you've got a teenager, you know exactly what that means. I gave her space. We had dinner. Finn told us a 12-minute story about a lizard he'd seen on the playground at school. It made almost no sense, and we both clapped when he finished. Normal night. Later, after Finn was in bed, Lily appeared in my doorway with her arms crossed, chewing the corner of her lip. She said, Dad, I need to show you something, and I need you not to freak out. She handed me her phone. On the screen was a thread of text messages from Gloria. She'd gotten Lily's number, probably from Aunt Brenda, who has the boundaries of a screen door in a hurricane, and had been texting my 13-year-old daughter for 3 days without me knowing. The messages started soft. Hi, sweetheart. Grandma misses you so much. But then they shifted, the way Gloria always does. Slowly, patiently, like she's dissolving something into a drink and waiting for you to finish it. I wish your dad would let me see you and Finn. Your dad has always been very emotional. Even when he was your age, he would overreact to things. Maybe you could talk to him for me, honey. Tell him I miss you guys. She was recruiting my daughter. She was going around me directly to my 13-year-old, calling me unstable and asking my kid to go to work on her behalf. And here's the part that got me more than anything else. She never once mentioned Finn. Not a single message. Didn't ask how he was. Didn't say she missed him. Didn't acknowledge he existed. The whole thing that started this. The reason I set the condition I set. And she couldn't even fake caring about him in a text to his own sister. But here's what I didn't know yet. Lily hadn't just been reading those messages. She'd been responding. To the message calling me emotional, Lily had written, My dad's not emotional. He's just done pretending everything is fine when it isn't. There's a difference. To the one asking Lily to talk to me on Gloria's behalf, I'm not going to ask my dad to forgive someone who hasn't apologized. That wouldn't make sense, right? I sat there staring at that phone for a long time. Then I looked at Lily, who was chewing her thumbnail, waiting to find out if she was in trouble, and I said, You are the most incredible person I have ever met in my life. She said, So I'm not grounded? I said, The only person in trouble right now is your grandmother. I screenshotted every single message Gloria had sent. Every one. And I forwarded them. No commentary, no explanation, just the screenshots. To every person who'd called me selfish. Aunt Brenda, Uncle Ray, Carol with the stolen church centerpiece. This is what she's doing now. That's all I said. Aunt Brenda called me back, and for the first time in this whole thing, she didn't open with a defense of my mother. She said, I didn't know she was doing that. I said, There's a lot you don't know, Brenda, because you've only been listening to one side. Uncle Ray went completely radio silent after that. Honestly, an upgrade. Jess called me laughing so hard she could barely get words out. She said, Lily is my absolute hero, and I'm buying that girl a pizza. And she did. Drove 40 minutes from Springfield with a large pepperoni and a stuffed triceratops for Finn. Because in her words, this kid deserves a present for no reason at all. That's exactly the kind of person I want in my kids' lives. Hold on, I need a second here. So after the picnic, after the silent treatment, After losing the monthly funding, the move Gloria landed on was to text a 13-year-old directly, badmouth her own son to a minor, and ask the kid to run point for her. That's the play. It's like if Michael Scott decided to draft Jim's niece as a spy and didn't think anyone would notice. She handed Cal a paper trail with her name on it. And she still never mentioned Finn. Not one word about the kid at the center of all of this. Which tells you everything you need to know. This was never about the picnic. This was about losing control of someone who used to just absorb it quietly. Welcome to the consequence era. Final update. After I sent those screenshots, there were 2 full weeks of complete silence from Gloria. She couldn't spin it this time. Her own words, her own grandchild's phone, black and white. Then one Saturday morning, I heard a knock at my front door. I opened it, and there was my dad, Ron. Standing on my porch in his old fishing hat, holding a paper bag from a bakery down the street. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week, eyes heavy, shoulders dropped. He sat down at my kitchen table, put the bag between us. Cinnamon rolls, my favorite from when I was a little kid, hadn't had them since I don't even know when. And then this man, who I have genuinely never once seen cry in my entire life, put his face in his hands and completely broke down. He said, "I failed you, Cal. I was sitting right there at that table, and I heard exactly what your mother said, and I didn't say a word, because I have been scared of that woman for 37 years. And I let it cost me my son and my grandkids." I said, "Dad, I don't need you to be perfect. I just need you to be honest." For 2 hours, he was. He told me things he'd never said out loud to anyone. That he always knew Gloria was wrong about how she treated me. That every time I sent money over the years, he felt sick and ashamed and didn't know how to stop it. That he'd brought it up with her once, years ago, and she didn't speak to him for 11 days afterward, so he never raised it again. Then he said something that I actually had to sit with. "She's scared, Cal. She won't admit it. But she's terrified she's losing you. And she doesn't know how to fix it because everyone has always just bent. She's never had to actually try." I said, "I know. I bent for 34 years. I'm done bending." He nodded slowly. Then he said, "What if I stopped bending too?" 2 days after that, Ron told me he'd had a real conversation with Gloria. Told her the picnic was wrong. Told her the texts to Lily were wrong. Told her the years of leaning on me financially were wrong. And he told her that if she didn't fix this, she wasn't just going to lose her son. She was going to lose him too. About 9 weeks after the picnic, my phone rang. Gloria. She was quiet for a long stretch, longer than comfortable. Then she said, "I need to talk to Finn, because I owe that boy an apology, and I owe you one too." I let the silence sit for a moment. Then I said, "I'll think about it." I didn't jump at it. After everything, the years of money, the picnic, the text to Lily, the smear campaign through the family, I wasn't going to sprint toward it just because she finally said the right thing. I needed to make sure my kids came first. Jess told me, "Let her come on your terms, in your house. If she blows it, that's it." So I invited Gloria for dinner the following Sunday. Just her, me, Lily, and Finn. I told her to come with a real apology or not to come at all. She showed up in a dress. She never wears dresses to casual dinners. And she brought yellow tulips. My favorite. I honestly didn't think she remembered that. Finn was on the couch watching cartoons when she came in. He looked up at her and didn't move. Didn't run over like he used to. Just watched her walk in, calm and still, the way only a little kid can be calm and still. And I could see it land across her face, what she'd actually done to him. She walked over to the couch, knelt down, not easy with her knees, and looked at him eye level. She said, "Finn, Grandma needs to tell you something. What I said at the picnic was wrong, and it was mean, and you did nothing wrong. You are my grandson, and I love you, and I am so sorry." Finn looked at her for about 5 full seconds. Then he said, "It's okay, Grandma. Do you want to see my new dinosaur?" 6 years old. No grudge, no conditions. Just grace. The kind adults forget exists or never had to begin with. She hugged him and cried. Real tears, not performance tears. The kind where your shoulders shake and you can't form words. Over dinner, she apologized to me. Said she knew she'd been unfair for years and she was going to make changes. actually do some real work on herself. Then she looked at Lily and said, I owe you an apology too. I should never have sent those messages. You were right to stand up for your brother. Lily said, Thank you, Grandma. Just so you know, I'll do it again if I have to. Gloria laughed at that. An actual real laugh. Things are not magically fixed. Trust doesn't rebuild at a dinner table. I still don't send money. That's permanent. My dad picked up a full-time position at a hardware store nearby, and I mean it, he sounds genuinely happier than I've heard him in years. Talks about lumber and drill bits like it's the most interesting thing in the world. Let him have it. Aunt Brenda dropped off a casserole a few weeks later and said, I shouldn't have gotten involved in that without making eye contact. I'll take it. Uncle Ray still hasn't said anything directly to me, but at Thanksgiving he sat next to Finn at the kids' table and spent the whole meal asking him about dinosaurs by name. For Ray, that's basically a formal peace agreement. Jess still comes by every other weekend with pizza and her boys. Last week she texted me, Day 147 of choosing yourself. Look how far you've come. I'm not gonna lie, I sat with that one for a few minutes. There's one thing that's still not fully resolved, and I don't think it ever will be. My mom and I are rebuilding, slowly, on my terms. But we're not who we were. Some of that distance is probably permanent. I'm okay with that. Whatever this becomes, it's going to be honest. That's more than I had before. Look, I'm not sitting here calling this guy a flawless human being. He swallowed it for a long time. But the second his 6-year-old asked if he was bad, the second his daughter stood up when no one else would, something changed and it wasn't going back. Some people in your life only act right once they realize you'll actually walk. Turns out his mom was one of them. Drop your thoughts below. Do you think he made the right call with the screenshots, or did he go too far? And if you're not subscribed yet, hit that button. New stories dropping every day. What's up, everybody? Welcome back. So today's story starts with a check, a $200 check, handed over at Thanksgiving dinner like it was some heartfelt gesture. The problem? The actual gift was supposed to be $500,000. Yeah, somebody in this guy's own family intercepted a life-changing wire transfer, blew it on a luxury vacation and a diamond ring, then slid him a $200 check and said, Grandpa's being generous. They forgot one tiny detail, though. The guy they stole from literally traces financial fraud for a living. What he did next at that Thanksgiving table is one of the most satisfying things I've ever covered on this channel. Let's get into it. I thanked my grandpa for a $200 check at Thanksgiving. He said the gift was $500,000. So I pulled out a projector and showed the whole family where it went. So my sister called me 3 days before Thanksgiving and told me not to come home. That was the first red flag. My name's Nate. I'm 31, live in Denver, and I work as a forensic fraud analyst at a consulting firm called Greystone Partners. Basically, I trace stolen money for a living. I've spent the last 8 years digging through international banking records, chasing fraudulent wire transfers across multiple countries, and helping federal agencies recover millions in stolen funds. I've testified in court more times than I can count on 2 hands. I know how people hide money. I know how they move it. I know when the numbers smell wrong, and I know when someone's lying about where the cash went. Turns out the biggest case of my career was sitting at my own family's dinner table. When Claire called, I was in my apartment going through case files for a client engagement. 3 monitors glowing, a cold cup of coffee I kept forgetting to drink, and a half-eaten turkey sandwich from the deli downstairs that honestly wasn't great. The bread was stale, but I was too deep in the work to care. Her voice had that specific brightness she always uses when she wants something, but is pretending she doesn't. I've known that tone since we were kids. It's the exact same voice she used when she borrowed $3,000 from me back in 2019 for a business opportunity that turned out to be one of those pyramid schemes where everyone sells scented candles to each other. Never paid me back. When I asked about it 6 months later, she told me I was being petty about money between siblings. Classic Claire. Hey, Natey, she said. Nobody calls me that except her. Listen, about Thanksgiving, maybe you should skip it this year. She gave me this whole story about how Grandpa was tired. His cardiologist was recommending less excitement. The local family was keeping things quiet this year. Then she dropped, you should probably save the airfare anyway. Those flights from Denver aren't cheap. And that's when I knew something was wrong. Claire has never once in her 33 years on this planet worried about my finances. That conversation had the same rhythm as the fraud cases I work every day, all the right words in all the right places, but the underlying structure was rotten. There was something she didn't want me to see. I told her I'd think about it. She hung up before I could even say goodbye. I sat there for a while staring at my screens. The case file I'd been working on went blurry because I wasn't seeing it anymore. Something was gnawing at me. So on instinct, I opened my banking app and checked the joint account Grandpa had set up for me when I turned 18. He'd seeded it with $5,000 back then and told me it was for emergencies. "You're smart with money, Nate," he'd said. "This is just in case you ever need a cushion." I'd used it once, junior year of college when my laptop died 2 days before finals. Worst timing of my life, by the way. I was running on energy drinks and panic for 48 straight hours. And paid it back within 6 months. Hadn't touched it since. The balance showed $2,347. Seemed about right for the original $5,000 minus the laptop loan, plus 13 years of minimal interest. But something made me click through to the full transaction history. Call it professional instinct. Call it paranoia. Whatever it was, I'm glad I listened. My stomach dropped. August 14th. Incoming wire transfer, $500,000. Memo. For Nate. With love, Grandpa. August 15th. Outgoing wire transfer, $499,800. Destination. External account ending in 7392. Memo. Investment opportunity, $500,000. In and out in 24 hours. And whoever moved it had left just enough in the account to avoid triggering a zero balance notification on my phone. That's not careless theft. That's calculated. Someone sat down and thought about exactly how much to leave behind, so I wouldn't get an alert. I set down my coffee mug real careful because my hands were shaking and I didn't want to drop it. Called the bank, got transferred 3 times before reaching someone in the fraud prevention department. A woman named Patricia, who sounded like she'd been on shift for about 12 hours too long. She confirmed the wire was initiated with valid login credentials and 2-factor authentication from an IP address in Bridgeport, Connecticut, where my family lives. Then she said something that made the room feel like it was tilting sideways. There was a power of attorney form on file, signed by me on August 10th, granting full authorization over the joint account to my mother, Linda Collins. I never signed a power of attorney. Not for her, not for anyone, ever. The verification process took 20 minutes. By the time I hung up, my coffee was cold and my appetite was completely gone. Patricia emailed me the document. I opened it and studied it the way I study evidence at work, line by line, pixel by pixel. Hold on. For those listening, this is me jumping in, not Nate. His own mother filed a forged power of attorney to steal $500,000 from his bank account. This isn't some random overseas scammer. This is the woman who drove him to school. She practiced his signature, filed paperwork, and cleaned out the account his 87-year-old grandfather funded as a gift. That's some catch-me-if-you-can energy. Except DiCaprio was at least charming about his forgeries. This woman forged her own kid's name, then handed him a $200 check like she deserved a thank you card. Anyway, it gets worse. The forged document was decent quality. All the right legal language, my name spelled correctly, proper formatting. The signature at the bottom looked like mine. Same looping G on my last name, same sharp stroke on the N. But here's the thing. I have a paranoid habit I picked up years ago from working fraud cases. Every single time I sign a legal document, I add a tiny diagonal mark in the upper right corner of the signature block. It's invisible unless you know exactly where to look. This signature didn't have it, and when I zoomed in further, the ink pressure was way too uniform. This was a digital composite. Somebody had scanned multiple signatures of mine from different documents and digitally stitched them together into one clean version. Professional work. Not professional enough. I pulled up a birthday card Mom had sent me last year. I'd actually kept it because her remembering my birthday was rare enough to be notable. Compared the letter forms side by side. The capital letters matched her handwriting perfectly. The way the downstrokes curved, the angle on certain crosses. It was her hand that had traced my name. My own mother forged my signature. I closed the birthday card and set it face down on my desk. Then I did what I do for a living. I went to work. Traced the destination account through financial databases I have access to through Greystone. 15 minutes of queries gave me the full picture. The account belonged to Blake Ashford, investment consultant, 35 years old, Columbia MBA, founder of some boutique firm called Ashford Capital. His LinkedIn profile had a professional headshot showing a guy with teeth that cost more than my first car and a suit that probably ran 5 figures. And there, in his recent activity, excited to announce my engagement to the incredible Claire Collins, posted August 20th. 6 days after my money vanished, I clicked through to Claire's Instagram. Public, of course. She never understood privacy settings, which honestly was the one time her carelessness worked in my favor. The feed was basically a receipt book, disguised as lifestyle content. August 16th, crystal clear water, white sand, palm trees. Much needed reset in the Maldives. Blessed. August 18th, sunset over an infinity pool. Grateful for this moment. August 20th, close-up of her left hand with a massive diamond ring catching the light. He asked, I said yes. I zoomed in on that ring. Emerald cut. At least 3 carats. Platinum band. Conservative estimate, $30,000. My $30,000, sitting on my sister's finger. I kept digging. Flight records confirmed 2 first-class tickets from JFK to the Maldives, purchased August 14th, same day as the wire transfer. Cost, $18,400. Travelers listed as Claire Collins and Blake Ashford. The ring was purchased from a high-end Manhattan jeweler on August 19th for $32,750. I also found records of a wellness retreat Claire attended in October, someplace in Fiji with sunrise meditation sessions and juice cleanses. $14,000. My $14,000 buying her inner peace. I took screenshots of every single thing, built a folder on my laptop, started mapping the entire money trail with the same precision I use for corporate investigations at Greystone. Every receipt, every timestamp, every transaction documented and organized chronologically. 47 pages by the time I was done. I printed them all and put them in a leather portfolio that Grandpa had given me when I graduated college. I noticed the irony, using his gift to document the theft of his other gift. Yo, time out. Picture this. Nate is sitting alone in his Denver apartment building a forensic fraud case against his own family, like it's just another Tuesday at the office. 47 pages of evidence in a leather portfolio. Flight manifests, jewelry receipts, forged documents, Instagram screenshots with timestamps. Most guys would have called Claire at 2 a.m. screaming, would have shown up at mom's house and lost it on the front lawn. Not this dude. Nate went full Ocean's 11, assembled the intel, rehearsed the reveal, packed a projector in his carry-on. That's not a man losing his cool. That's a guy who does presentations for a living and just realized his next audience is his own family. Buckle up. Claire texted me that evening. So you're definitely not coming Thursday, right? Just want to make sure so mom doesn't overbuy food. I stared at the message for a full minute, then typed, actually, I changed my mind. I'll be there. Her response came fast. Really? Are you sure? I thought you said work was crazy. I never said that, by the way. She just assumed I would. Work can wait, I typed. Family's important. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Okay, great. See you Thursday. I booked a flight, packed my laptop, the portable projector I use for client presentations, and all 47 printed pages. Wednesday, I landed at JFK, rented a car, and drove to Bridgeport in cold November rain that made the whole state feel like it was mourning something. Checked into a hotel 15 minutes from my parents' house. Ordered room service, some overcooked pasta thing that came with breadsticks that were somehow both hard and soggy at the same time, which shouldn't even be physically possible. Then I spent the rest of the evening building the presentation on my laptop. Title slide, Family Investment Opportunity, a case study in wire fraud. Subtitle, How $500,000 became $200. 12 minutes for the full reveal. Strategic pauses built in at key moments for maximum impact. I ran through it 4 times, adjusting the pacing each round. I'd presented to boardrooms full of executives, testified in federal court explaining complex fraud to juries. This should have been easier than all of that. It wasn't. Not even close. These weren't strangers. These were people who'd been at my birthday parties. Thursday morning, drove to the house at 2. Dinner was at 4. Mom had texted the schedule like she always does. Appetizers at 4, turkey at 5, dessert by 6:30. Very organized, very controlled. The house looked exactly like it always had from the outside. Cream-colored colonial, black shutters, The maple tree in the front yard I used to climb when I was 8. Normal. Innocent. Mom opened the door before I could knock. Her hug felt rehearsed. She'd been practicing the right amount of warmth. I'm so glad you decided to come after all. She was wearing the nice cashmere sweater with pearl buttons. Hair done at a salon. Something brittle behind her smile that I might not have caught if I wasn't specifically looking for cracks. Grandpa Henry was in his usual chair by the fireplace, reading the newspaper with his glasses perched on his nose. When I walked in, his whole face brightened in a way that made my chest tight. Nate, there's my boy. I crossed the room and hugged him careful. He felt frailer than last visit, bones more prominent through his cardigan, a little less weight than before. But his grip when he squeezed my arm was still strong. We talked for a minute about Denver, about work. Still catching the bad guys? He asked. Always, I said. He smiled with his whole face. That's my grandson. Justice before everything. Those words landed heavier than he knew. Claire appeared from the kitchen with Blake behind her, like an expensive accessory you bring to impress people. She'd lost weight since I'd seen her last, the kind that comes from anxiety and green juices and skipping meals, not from anything healthy. That ring was impossible to miss. It caught every light source in the room and threw tiny rainbow fragments across the wall. Blake extended a hand. Great to finally meet you, man. Claire talks about you all the time. His handshake was exactly what you'd expect. Firm. Practiced. Investment consultant handshake. Everything about this guy was practiced. The smile, the eye contact, the way he stood with his shoulders open. The confidence of someone who's literally never been told no in his entire adult life. Congratulations on the engagement, I said. Thanks, bro. She's 1 in a million. He pulled Claire close and kissed the top of her head. She glowed. Either she was a better actress than I'd ever given her credit for, or she'd compartmentalized the theft so completely she'd convinced herself it never happened. Dad was in the den watching football on mute. Looked up when I came in. Nate, Dad. That was about the extent of it. We never had much, and today wasn't going to change that. The dinner conversation was aggressively normal for the first hour. Blake talked about a golf trip he took to Scotland. Claire described her new position at some event planning firm. She was really excited about a corporate gala she was organizing for January. Went on and on about flower arrangements and seating charts until even Blake's eyes glazed over a little. Mom discussed her book club's current selection. Dad stayed quiet, refilling his water glass more often than seemed necessary. I ate my food and I waited. The stuffing was actually incredible. Mom uses this Italian sausage and sage recipe she got from Grandpa's wife before she passed. And I'm not going to lie, even in the middle of all of this, I had 2 helpings. The turkey was dry, though. It's always dry. Every year, I don't know why anyone pretends otherwise. Then Mom stood up. Almost forgot. Nate, Grandpa wanted me to give you something. She disappeared into the kitchen and came back holding a white business envelope. My name written on the front in her handwriting. She pressed it into my hand with a careful expression. From Grandpa, she said quietly. Don't mention the amount. He's a bit embarrassed that things are tight this year. I opened the envelope. Inside was a check. Pay to the order of Nate Collins, $200. Written in my mother's handwriting, signed with Grandpa's shaky signature at the bottom. The room was watching me. I looked across at Grandpa. He was smiling at me with that warm, proud expression I'd known my entire life. The look he gave me every time I showed him a report card or told him about a case I'd cracked at work. Thank you, I said, looking right at him. This is really generous. Mom's shoulders dropped about 2 inches with relief. Claire took a sip of water. Blake checked his phone under the table. The moment passed. We moved to the living room for the main course. Claire started telling everyone about a wellness retreat she'd done the month before. The sunrise meditation sessions were absolutely transformative. I feel like I'm finally learning to be present, you know? Blake nodded like she'd just quoted scripture. She came back a completely different person. More centered, more herself. I sat there wondering if he knew the retreat had cost 14 grand of my money. Probably. He struck me as the type who tracks every dollar that crosses his path. Mom looked over at me. You should try something like that, Nate. All that desk work. You need to learn to enjoy life. Disconnect once in a while. Then Grandpa stood up and tapped his water glass with a fork. I'd like to make a toast. The table went quiet. He talked about his 87 years. The war. The bridges he built as a civil engineer that are still standing. His family. Then he looked at Claire, then at me, and his voice got thick. Nate, you've always been my quiet one. Thoughtful. Principled. You don't take shortcuts, even when the shortcut would be easier. That's rare these days. He paused. Which is why I wanted to help you take the next step. Buy a house. Start your own firm if that's what you want. I hope the gift I gave you will make that dream a little easier to reach. He raised his glass. To Nate, may you build something lasting. Everyone raised theirs. I raised mine. Thank you, Grandpa, I said clearly. Thank you so much for the $200. His smile faltered. The table went completely, absolutely dead silent. What $200? He said. Pause for a second. Picture this room. Dead quiet. Candle wax dripping. Claire's gone white, like someone hit Control-Z on her complexion. Blake is frozen mid-sip like a screensaver. Dad's staring at his plate like the mashed potatoes hold answers to the universe. And Grandpa, 87 years old, decorated veteran, is slowly realizing his own daughter stole every penny and replaced it with a $200 check. This is Red Wedding energy from Game of Thrones, except the guy holding the sword is a forensic accountant with a laptop bag. And he's about to plug in a projector. Oh, this is going to be legendary. I pulled the check from my pocket, held it up so the whole table could see. This check, the one Mom gave me before dinner. From you. $200. Grandpa's face shifted from confusion to something darker. Linda, what is he talking about? The gift I wired Nate was $500,000. Mom's fork clattered against her plate. Dad, you're not remembering correctly. Your medication. The doctor said it causes confusion. I'm not confused. His voice was quiet, but it cut through everything like a blade. I transferred $500,000 into Nate's account on August 14th. I got the confirmation email. I saved it. He started reaching for his phone with shaking hands. Mom stood up. Dad, please, let's talk about this privately. You're getting upset. Show me the account, Nate, Grandpa said, ignoring her completely. I already had my laptop out of my bag, opened it up. The screen glowed blue in the candlelit room. I pulled up the bank statement, turned the laptop so Grandpa could see it clearly. August 14th, incoming wire, $500,000. August 15th, outgoing wire, $499,800. Current balance, $2,747. Grandpa stared at the numbers. His hand went to his chest, and for one horrible moment, I genuinely thought he was having a cardiac event. Where did it go? He whispered. I looked at Claire. Silent tears running down her face. Mascara starting to streak. Blake had his hand on her shoulder, but everything about his body language said he was calculating the fastest route to the front door. That's what I'd like to know too, Grandpa, I said. This is a family matter, Mom said, voice rising. We will discuss this later, privately. No. I reached into my bag. We're discussing it right now. I pulled out the portable projector, set it on the dining table, pushed the stuffing dish and the gravy boat aside to make room, plugged the cable into my laptop. The white wall behind Grandpa's chair lit up with my first slide. Family Investment Opportunity. A Case Study in Wire Fraud. Subtitle, How $500,000 Became $200. Dad's water glass slipped from his hand. Water pooled across the white tablecloth and nobody moved to clean it up. The extended family, Uncle Jim, Aunt Karen, Cousin Becca, and her husband, started backing away from the table. Fast. We should go, Aunt Karen muttered. This is between immediate family. The front door opened and closed 3 times in about 90 seconds. Car engines fired up in the driveway one after another. By the time the commotion settled, 6 of us remained in that room. Grandpa, Mom, Dad, Claire, Blake, and me. I advanced to the next slide. Bank transfer records blown up large enough to read from across the room. I walked them through it piece by piece. August 14th, Grandpa initiates a wire of $500,000 intended for me. August 15th, someone with access to the account transfers $499,800 to an external account belonging to Blake Ashford. Blake went rigid in his chair. Next slide. Claire's Instagram posts, dated and time-stamped. The Maldives photos. The infinity pool. 2 first-class tickets from JFK purchased the same day as The Wire. $18,400. Claire made a sound like a wounded animal. Next slide. The engagement ring, zoomed in, purchased from a high-end Manhattan jeweler on August 19th. $32,750. Blake's jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscles working. Next slide. The forged power of attorney, signature highlighted. Pen pressure inconsistencies circled with arrows. This document was filed with the bank on August 10th, granting my mother full access to the joint account, I said, using the laser pointer. The signature is a forgery. Notice the pressure variations here, here, and here. The letter forms match my mother's handwriting, not mine. Then I played the voicemail. Mom's voice filling the dining room, calling an attorney named Arthur Peaton, asking him to help paper this over. Create some kind of fake loan agreement. Something to explain the money if I ever found out. His recorded response was clear. This is fraud, he told her. I won't be a party to it. You need to tell Nate the truth. Mom was crying now. Angry tears, not guilty ones. You don't understand. The medical bills from your father's procedure? Covered by insurance, I said. I checked. The mortgage is current. I pulled those records too. You had no right. I had every right. You stole from me. Wait. Can we talk about Blake for a second? This man has been watching a live forensic presentation. Projector, laser pointer, the works, proving his Maldives vacation and engagement ring were bankrolled by stolen money. And he hasn't said one word. He's just sitting there running a cost-benefit analysis on how fast he can reach the front door without looking like he's fleeing a crime scene. If quietly abandoning people when things get real was a degree at Columbia, this dude graduated top of his class. CEO of Exit Strategy Incorporated. What's next? A LinkedIn post about knowing when to reallocate personal resources? Just watch what he does. Claire was sobbing openly now. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. The wedding is in 6 months, and Blake said we needed to make the right impression on his family, and I panicked. So you stole from me. It wasn't like that. What was it like then, Claire? Explain it to me. She couldn't. She just sat there crying with mascara running down both cheeks and nothing coming out of her mouth that resembled an actual answer. Blake stood up, not panicked, decided. Like he'd been waiting for the right moment to execute a plan he'd been forming since slide 2. Lose my number, he said to Claire. Not angry, just done. All of it. This family, this drama, whatever this is, I don't do this. He walked out of the dining room, through the hallway, and out the front door. It slammed behind him. Engine started. Gone. Whole exit took maybe 15 seconds. Claire screamed after him. Actually screamed, standing in the hallway with her mascara-streaked face and that $30,000 ring on her finger catching the hallway light. Then she turned on me. You just destroyed my entire life. You destroyed it yourself when you chose to steal. I hate you. I hate you so much. She grabbed her coat and her purse off the entry table and left. Tires squealed on the driveway as she pulled out. Dad hadn't moved through any of it. Just sat there staring at the water stains spreading across the white tablecloth like he was watching paint dry. Finally, he stood up. I'm going to bed, he announced to nobody in particular. Walked upstairs, bedroom door closed behind him. 3 of us left. Me, Mom, and Grandpa. Mom sank into a chair and put her hands over her face. I thought it would be okay. I thought you would never find out. You thought wrong. Grandpa stood up slowly. His hands were steady now. His face was set in something I'd never seen on him before in my entire life. Grief and betrayal mixed with a finality that looked permanent. He reached for his phone. Mom grabbed his arm. Dad, please. Think about the family. Think about Claire's future. Think about... I am thinking about it, he said quietly, pulling his arm free. I'm thinking about how I trusted you. How I called you before I made the transfer and told you I wanted to help Nate. Asked you to make sure he knew the gift came with love. That it was from me. He paused and his voice got even quieter. And you took that trust and turned it into theft. He made the call. Mom collapsed to her knees. Actually collapsed. Hands clasped together like she was praying. Please, Dad. I'm your daughter. I made a mistake. Two officers arrived 18 minutes later. I'd already prepared a separate folder for them, every piece of evidence organized chronologically. They sat at the dining room table, turkey cold, candles burned down to stubs, and went through everything. Methodical, thorough. They asked Grandpa if he wanted to press charges. He said yes without hesitating. They asked me. I thought about Claire's screaming, Mom on her knees, Dad walking away like he always does. I thought about all the future Thanksgivings that would never happen. Then I thought about Grandpa's face during that toast. The pride, the love, the years he'd saved and planned so he could give his grandson something real. Yes, I said, I want to pursue this. After the officers left around 11, Grandpa walked me to the front door. The house was quiet in that heavy way that only happens after something breaks permanently. You okay? I asked him. He smiled, but it was sad. Last night, before you arrived, your mother told me she'd given you my check. Said you thanked her. Said you were grateful. He paused. Said the $200 would really help with rent. The manipulation of it was breathtaking. When you thanked me for $200 at dinner, he said quietly, I almost let it go, almost convinced myself I was confused, that my memory was wrong, that maybe I hadn't actually sent the full amount. He looked at me with those sharp old eyes. Because that was easier than believing my own daughter would do this to us. But I saw your face, and I knew you were giving me the chance to really see what they'd done. My throat was so tight I could barely talk. He put his hand on my shoulder, same hand that taught me to tie my shoes, to cast a fishing line, to shake hands firm and look people in the eye. You're worth more than any amount I could ever wire you, he said. I hugged him real careful because he was fragile and 87 and also the strongest person I've ever known. Okay, hold on. This is me, not Nate. That grandpa moment got me. This man, 87 years old, a veteran who built bridges that are still standing, he almost let his daughter gaslight him into thinking he was losing his mind. Almost convinced himself his memory was faulty rather than face the truth about his own kid. And the only reason he didn't? Because Nate gave him the chance to see it. Didn't scream, didn't accuse. Just said $200 at the right moment and let the truth handle the rest. If that's not real respect between a grandfather and grandson, I don't know what is. Here's how it all shook out. Final update. The fallout was immediate, and it was everywhere. By Monday, the story had leaked to local media, probably through the police report or one of the relatives who watched me set up a projector at Thanksgiving dinner. Claire's employer, some boutique event planning agency that prided itself on ethical business practices, fired her on Tuesday. The family's church asked my parents to step down from their volunteer committees. Blake scrubbed every trace of Claire from his LinkedIn, deleted all their photos, and moved to Boston 6 months later. He was never charged. Prosecutors couldn't prove he knew the money was stolen, though everyone involved was pretty sure he did. In January, federal charges were filed. Wire fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, and forgery for Mom. Accessory and conspiracy for Claire. The FBI got involved because the wire transfer crossed state lines and went through federal banking systems. I gave a 4-hour deposition in a federal building in Hartford, walking them through every piece of evidence, every database query, every screenshot. The assistant U.S. attorney, Lisa Torres, told me it was one of the cleanest fraud cases she'd ever worked on. Most families who steal from each other hide it better, she said. Mom eventually pleaded guilty to reduced charges. 18 months in federal prison. 3 years supervised release. Full restitution of $499,800 plus interest and penalties. Claire pleaded to conspiracy. 12 months, 2 years supervised release. She was ordered to return the engagement ring, but Blake had already sold it the week after Thanksgiving. She had to buy it back at auction for $28,000 she didn't have. Borrowed it from an aunt. The ring was then resold by the court, with the proceeds going toward restitution. Dad filed for divorce in February. Got the house. Mom got nothing. I haven't spoken to any of them since that Thanksgiving. Blocked numbers, blocked emails, blocked every platform. Dad tried reaching out twice through relatives. I declined both times. I didn't want reconciliation. I didn't want apologies. I wanted them to understand that trust, once destroyed, doesn't come back. Grandpa and I do dinner once a month now. Video calls mostly, since Denver to Connecticut is a haul, but sometimes I fly out for a long weekend. We talk about his old maps, his engineering career, my cases. We don't talk about Mom or Claire. In March, Grandpa set up a new account, transferred another $500,000. This time it came with a handwritten letter. Nate, this is the gift I always intended to give you. Use it to buy a house, start a company, build something that matters. I know you'll do it right. Love, Grandpa. I bought a house. 3-bedroom craftsman in a nice Denver neighborhood, walking distance to a park. Got a proper home office now for my caseload. Second bedroom is set up for Grandpa whenever he visits. Third bedroom is empty. Maybe someday it won't be. Last week I got a letter from Claire. Handwritten. 8 pages. No return address. It started with, Nate, I know you'll probably throw this away without reading it, but I have to try. I read the whole thing, all 8 pages. Then I fed it through my paper shredder and watched her words turn to confetti. Some people think forgiveness is noble. Maybe it is. But I'm not interested in noble. I'm interested in being whole. And wholeness for me meant cutting out the people who tried to carve me up and sell the pieces. They stole my money. They tried to steal my grandfather's gift and his trust. They almost got away with it. But I walked away with something they can never touch. So yeah, that was my Thanksgiving. How was yours? Look, I'm not going to pretend this was easy for Nate. Going after your own mother and sister with federal charges is heavy. But when the people supposed to have your back are the ones forging your signature and robbing your 87-year-old grandfather, you don't negotiate. You don't hand out second chances to people who were never planning to come clean. You show up with a projector and 47 pages of evidence and let the truth handle it. That's not petty. That's a man who decided his peace was worth more than their comfort. Drop your thoughts below. What would you have done? And if you're not subscribed, hit that button. We'll catch you in the next one. Mom kicked me out because stepdad and his kids hate me, but I own the house. So, when I was 15, my dad passed away. It was a tough time. Like, losing him felt like my whole world got flipped upside down. My dad, though, was always that guy who had everything planned out, super organized. The kind of guy who'd keep receipts for stuff from 10 years ago just in case. Anyway, turns out he had his will all set up way in advance, and let me tell you, it was specific as hell. After he passed, my mom didn't waste any time moving on. I get it. Maybe she was lonely, but it felt way too quick, One moment we're at his funeral, and before I even had a chance to process everything, she's already talking about some new guy she met. And I'm like, wait, what? It felt like one minute I was dealing with losing my dad, and the next, there was this stranger, Rob, moving into our house. It all happened so fast, I barely had time to blink. One day it was just me and my mom trying to get by, and the next, there's this dude in our living room acting like he's been there all along. Rob was, well, I guess he was all right at first. But man, it just didn't sit right with me. I mean, my dad's stuff was still all over the place. His chair, his tools, even his favorite mug that he'd always use every morning. It was like he was still there. And then Rob comes in and suddenly all that stuff starts disappearing. My mom would be like, oh, we need to make room for Rob's things. And I'd think, what's the rush? It's not like Rob was paying rent or anything. It felt like she was erasing my dad bit by bit. And that stung. Anyway, a couple of months after my dad passed, I got the news about the inheritance. I remember the day so clearly because it was probably the one time I actually felt like something was going right. My dad's lawyer sat me down and explained everything. My dad left everything to me, not a penny to my mom. I guess it makes sense since they weren't married, and legally she didn't have a claim. But still, it caught me off guard. At first I was like, wait, are you serious? I didn't really know how to react. I mean, I was just a kid, and suddenly I was told I owned properties and money. It was kind of overwhelming. My mom, though? Oh, she was pissed. She tried to act all supportive, but I could see it in her eyes. She wasn't expecting that. She probably assumed she'd get at least something, but nope, it was all mine. And because of the way my dad set up the will, there was no way she could challenge it. The guy was thorough. He made sure everything was locked down so tight that even if she tried, she'd lose. At first, she tried to play nice, like, hey, I'm so happy for you, sweetheart. Your dad really loved you. But it wasn't long before she started pushing. She kept bringing up how it would be nice if I shared some of it with her. As a gesture of goodwill or whatever. It was always framed like it was my choice, but the way she said it, it felt more like pressure. And then, one day, she comes up with this plan. She asked me if I'd consider transferring one of the properties to her. I remember standing there, just kind of staring at her like, is she for real? She went on, saying how it would make things easier with Rob if he felt more secure, like he was really part of the family. She wanted to show him that he was welcome by putting the property in her name. In her head, this was all about making him feel comfortable so they could have a future together. But to me, it felt like she was choosing him over me. I mean, I was 15. I just lost my dad. I was still trying to figure out how to get through each day, and here she was, basically asking me to give up a piece of my dad's legacy to make her new boyfriend happy. It was like she didn't even think about how it might feel for me, her own kid. I told her I couldn't, even if I wanted to. My dad's will was set up so that I couldn't touch any of it until I was 21. The look on her face when I said that, man, I don't think I'll ever forget it. She tried to hide it, but she was mad. I think she knew deep down that she couldn't change anything, but it didn't stop her from trying. She'd bring it up every once in a while, just testing the waters, like, are you sure you can't transfer it? Not even one property? And every time, I had to remind her that there was literally nothing I could do. It wasn't my choice. It was how my dad set things up. To be honest, even if I could have given her the property, I don't think I would have. It felt like a betrayal to my dad's memory. This was his way of taking care of me, making sure I had a future, and I wasn't going to mess that up just to make my mom's new boyfriend feel cozy. And of course, there was Rob's kids. My mom was bending over backwards to make sure they felt welcome. They were cool, I guess. A son who's now 18 and a daughter who's 19. But my mom was all about making them comfortable, making sure they had everything they needed. It wasn't like she was a total monster to me or anything. She still acted like a mom, but there was this clear difference in how she treated them compared to me. I'd see them all go on trips together. She'd always frame it like it was this great idea, saying, wouldn't you rather visit your grandparents on your dad's side? Like, every single time they planned something, she'd suggest I spend time elsewhere. I could see right through it. She didn't outright say, you can't come, but it was obvious she didn't want me around. And when you're a kid, you don't really know how to react to that. You just kind of go along with it, hoping that maybe she'd change her mind, but she never did. I spent a lot of weekends at my grandparents' place, and don't get me wrong, they were great. But every time I heard about one of those trips, it was like a little reminder that my mom was choosing her new life over me. Looking back, I think my dad must have known something like this could happen. Why else would he leave everything to me and nothing to her? Maybe he saw how things were going between them, or maybe he just wanted to make sure I'd be okay if anything ever happened to him. Either way, I'm grateful he did. But at the same time, it made things with my mom really complicated. I felt like I was stuck in the middle, having to protect what my dad left me while also dealing with my mom and her new family. That's pretty much how things went for a while. Rob settled in more and more, and my mom made sure his kids felt like they were at home. And me? Well, I kept my distance and just tried to keep the peace, but it wasn't easy. I was only 15, trying to make sense of everything, and all I knew was that things were never going back to how they used to be. So by the time I turned 17, things had gone from awkward to full-blown tense between me and Rob. I mean, I tried to stay out of his way at first. Like, he was my mom's boyfriend, whatever, I didn't really care about him. But he started acting like he was the man of the house, and that's when things went south. It was my dad's house, right? And here he was, moving his stuff in, giving me attitude, and trying to tell me what I could or couldn't do. It wasn't even subtle. He'd say stuff like, you need to show more respect around here, or it's time you learn some discipline. I just sat there thinking, who does this guy think he is? Like, he's not my dad, and he sure as hell doesn't get to act like he owns the place. So I pushed back. Every time he tried to lay down some rule or act like he had a say, I'd remind him that the house wasn't his. I even came up with this nickname, John Conroy, which honestly made no sense, but it bugged him, and that was enough for me. Every time he tried to tell me what to do, I'd be like, all right, John Conroy, whatever you say. And man, did that get under his skin. Things started getting pretty heated between us. It was like this silent war. He'd make these comments, and I'd snap back. My mom, of course, was always trying to play peacemaker. She'd say, oh, you two just need time to get used to each other, or Rob's only trying to help you grow up. But I knew it wasn't about that. It was about control. Rob wanted to be the boss, and I wasn't about to let that happen. And the thing is, my mom started taking his side more and more. She'd get upset with me for disrespecting him. She even started saying stuff like, you need to understand that Rob's a part of our family now. Our family. As if we'd all agreed on that or something. I'd tell her, this isn't his house, it's Dad's, and he's not going to just waltz in and act like it's his. But she never listened. She just kept telling me to get along and try harder. One day, things really blew up. Rob had been acting all tough, talking about how I needed to pull my weight around the house. And yeah, that pissed me off. I told him straight up, "You're not my dad, and this isn't your house." He started getting all red-faced, and my mom came rushing in, trying to calm things down. She was like, "Why do you always have to fight with him? Why can't you just respect him?" And I was like, "Why should I? He doesn't respect me, and he doesn't respect that this was Dad's house." That argument was kind of the last straw. Rob stormed off, and my mom just stood there, looking tired and frustrated. She said something like, "This isn't working. We can't keep fighting like this." And that's when she dropped the bomb on me. She told me I needed to leave. I couldn't believe it. I stood there waiting for her to take it back or say she was just upset and didn't mean it. But she didn't. She looked me in the eye and said, "I think it's best if you find somewhere else to stay for a while." I was like, "Wait, my house? You're kicking me out of my house?" She just sighed and said, "It's not just your house, it's our home. And Rob and his kids deserve to feel comfortable here too." I felt this wave of anger and hurt hit me all at once. She was choosing them over me. It wasn't even a question anymore. She kept going, saying, "I'm doing this for your own good so you can have some space and cool down." But I knew it wasn't about me cooling down. It was about making things easier for her and Rob. She thought if I wasn't around, they'd have their perfect little family and everything would be fine. I left the room, slamming the door behind me. I was so mad, I could barely think straight. I didn't even know what to do next. I mean, I was 17. I didn't have a job that paid enough to get my own place, and all my stuff was in my house. I went up to my room and started packing up my things, just throwing stuff into bags. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay there anymore. Thankfully, my grandparents stepped in. They'd always been there for me, even when my mom wasn't. They offered me a place to stay, and I grabbed onto that offer like a lifeline. My grandpa picked me up that evening, and I remember just sitting in the car, staring out the window, feeling numb. It was like everything had crumbled in one day. My own mom was kicking me out of the house my dad had left me. When I moved into my grandparents' place, it felt safe. They were amazing, and they never made me feel like I was a burden. My grandpa especially tried to make me feel better. He said, "You're always welcome here, kiddo. Don't let anyone make you think otherwise." And honestly, I needed to hear that. After everything with my mom, it felt good to know someone had my back. But my mom? She'd still come over to visit sometimes, acting like everything was fine. She'd say things like, "I love you, you know that, right? And I'm just trying to make sure everything stays peaceful." It was like she was trying to make herself feel better about what she'd done. I remember one time she brought over a bunch of my old things, saying she thought I'd want them at my grandparents' place. And I just stared at her, thinking, "You want to act like this is normal? But it's not." She'd talk about how she was just doing what was best for everyone, how Rob needed space to feel at home, and how I'd understand one day. I just nodded along, but inside, I felt like she was justifying her own choices. She'd say stuff like, "You'll always have a home with us when you're ready." And it took everything in me not to tell her that it wasn't my home anymore. It was Rob's. It was hard to see her and not feel angry. She was the one person who was supposed to be on my side, and she wasn't. She was choosing some guy she'd known for barely a couple of years over me, her own son. And she acted like it was all for my benefit, like kicking me out was somehow her way of helping me grow up. After a while, I just stopped engaging with her visits. I'd be polite, but I wouldn't let her excuses get to me anymore. I focused on my school, my friends, and my grandparents. They became my real family during that time. My grandma would always tell me, "You've got us, and you're going to be okay." And even though I still felt angry and hurt, having them around made things a little easier. I guess, deep down, I started to understand that my mom was never going to be the parent I needed her to be. She was too focused on building this new life with Rob and his kids. And me? I was just a reminder of the old life she was trying to move past. So I started moving past it too. I figured if she could pick Rob over me, then I could choose to focus on myself instead. At the end of the day, I knew I had my grandparents' support, and that was enough. I learned to stand on my own 2 feet, even if it meant not having my mom there. And honestly, that was probably the best lesson I could have learned back then, relying on myself and knowing when to walk away, even from people who are supposed to care. When I finally finished college, I knew it was time to take a closer look at the properties my dad left me. The whole time I was with my grandparents, I kept reminding myself that these properties were my shot at building something for myself. My dad, he'd planned everything so that I'd have a future, even without him around. And I wasn't going to let that go to waste. One of the places my dad left me was the house my mom and Rob were living in. Yeah, the same one where I used to live before everything went down. It was a good house, solid structure, nice neighborhood, perfect for renting out if I ever got the chance. So, with my degree in hand and the idea of maybe going for a master's on the horizon, I thought, why not renovate it and rent it out? I mean, extra income wouldn't hurt, especially if I was planning on going back to school. I knew I had to break the news to my mom at some point, and I didn't expect it to go well, but it had to be done. I showed up at the house one day, ready to have the conversation. The plan was simple. I'd tell her about my intention to renovate and give them a reasonable time frame to figure out their next steps. It was going to be tough, no doubt, but I figured if I was respectful about it, she might understand. Well, that plan didn't even get a chance. When I knocked on the door, no one answered. The house was dead quiet, and their car wasn't in the driveway. I thought maybe they were just out running errands, so I waited for a bit. But after a while, it was clear they weren't coming back anytime soon. I tried calling my mom's cell, left a voicemail, and even sent her a text saying I'd stop by and wanted to talk. No response. So I headed back to my grandparents' place. Later that night, I found out they were on vacation. My grandma mentioned it casually, like, "Oh, your mom and Rob went down to Florida for a few days." I was like, seriously? Here I am trying to have a mature conversation about my property, and they're off on some beach getaway? I mean, I get that people need a break, but a heads up would have been nice. I gave it a couple more days, hoping she'd get back to me. But still nothing. No call, no text. Just radio silence. It was frustrating. I felt like she was avoiding me, and that made things harder. I needed to move forward, but I couldn't do that if she kept dodging me. So, after waiting around for a bit, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I knew legally the house was mine. My name was on the deed, and I was the one paying the property taxes every year, so I had the right to take control of the situation. I decided to change the locks. Yeah, I know it sounds drastic, but it felt like the only way to make it clear that I was serious. I needed to start the renovation process, and I couldn't have them treating it like a vacation home while I was trying to move forward with my plans. So, I went ahead and did it. I called a locksmith, got the locks changed, and made sure I had all the keys. While I was there, I took a look around the place. It was weird being back in the house where I grew up, but it felt different. It didn't feel like my home anymore. It felt like a stranger's place, with bits and pieces of my mom and Rob's life scattered around. Seeing it like that only made me more determined to follow through with my plan. The next day, my phone started blowing up. My mom had finally gotten back, and she was furious. I had a bunch of missed calls and angry voicemails from her, basically demanding to know why they couldn't get in. She said stuff like, "How could you do this to us?" And, "This is so disrespectful." I could feel the anger just pouring through the phone. I knew she'd be upset, but hearing her like that, I guess it hit harder than I thought. I finally picked up when she called again, and she was shouting before I could even say hello. She was like, "Why did you lock us out of the house?" I tried to stay calm and told her that I'd been trying to reach her for days to talk about my plans. She didn't want to hear it. She kept saying things like, "You can't just kick us out like this," and "We have nowhere else to go right now." I explained that I'd given them plenty of time, and I had every right to reclaim the house. I told her I planned to renovate and that I'd given her a heads up, but she wasn't having any of it. She said, "This is still my home. You can't just take it away from me." And that's when I knew there was no reasoning with her. In her head, it wasn't about what was legal or fair. It was about what she thought she deserved. At that point, I had to put my foot down. I told her they had 2 weeks to find somewhere else to live. I wasn't going to be a jerk about it. I wanted to give them a chance to move their stuff and figure things out. But 2 weeks was all I could offer. I told her that after that, the renovation work would begin, and they couldn't stay. The silence on the other end of the line was almost worse than the shouting. When she finally spoke, her voice was low and cold. She said, "I never thought you'd do this to your own mother." And I felt that, like a punch to the gut. But I knew if I backed down now, I'd never be able to move forward. This was about me taking control of my own life, and sometimes that means making tough calls. After that, I didn't hear from her for the rest of the day. But the next morning, I showed up at the house to start preparing for the renovations, and guess who was waiting for me in the driveway? My mom and Rob, both of them looking furious. Rob tried to step up to me like he was going to intimidate me into letting them stay. He was all, "You think you can just kick us out like this? You've got no right." I didn't back down. I told him flat out, "This isn't your house, and it never was. I'm the one paying for it, and I'm the one calling the shots." He was fuming, but he couldn't argue with that. My mom, though, she started crying, saying I was being unfair, that I was putting them on the street. She said I was acting just like my father, and not in a nice way. It stung, but I kept my cool. I tried to be reasonable and said, "Look, you have 2 weeks to figure things out. I'm giving you that time, but I need to start the renovations soon. This is my property, and I'm doing what's best for me." She just shook her head, tears streaming down her face, saying she couldn't believe how cold I was being. Rob was standing there, trying to look tough, but I could tell he knew he had no power in this. It wasn't easy. Seeing my mom cry, seeing how angry she was, it sucked. I felt guilty, even though I knew I was doing what I had to do. But I also knew that if I let them stay, I'd never get them out. This was my chance to take back what was mine, and I wasn't going to let it slip through my fingers. By the time they left, it felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders, but at the same time, there was this knot in my chest. I knew I'd made the right call, but that didn't make it any less painful. I drove back to my grandparents' place, knowing I'd have to see this through, no matter how hard it got. Alright, so after I told my mom and Rob they had 2 weeks to move out, I thought maybe things would calm down a bit. I figured they'd be mad at first, but then they'd start packing and just accept it. I mean, it wasn't like they had any other option. But of course, nothing is ever that simple. Instead of dealing with it quietly, my mom decided to make things as dramatic as possible. The next day, I went over to the house to start preparing for the renovations. I wanted to check out the backyard and take some measurements for the work I had planned. I had a contractor scheduled to come by in a few weeks, and I wanted to make sure everything was good to go. I was out there with a notepad, making notes, when I heard the back gate swing open. I turned around, and there was my mom, storming in like she was on a mission. She was furious. Like, I'm talking full-on yelling before I even had a chance to say anything. "How could you do this to us?" she shouted, her face all red and puffy. She kept going, throwing her hands in the air and demanding to know how I could betray my own family. She was like, "We have nowhere else to go. What do you expect us to do?" I tried to stay calm, even though my heart was pounding. I told her, "Mom, I gave you 2 weeks. You have time to find a place. I'm not just kicking you out with no warning." But she wasn't hearing it. She went on and on about how I was being selfish and how she had sacrificed so much for me. And honestly, that got to me. It was like she was trying to make me feel guilty for wanting my own space back. And then, of course, Rob showed up. He came in with that same tough guy attitude, like he was going to somehow change my mind by glaring at me. He was all, "You think you can just boss us around because you own this place? We've built a life here." And I was like, "No, Rob, I built a life here. This was my dad's house, and I'm taking back what's mine." I could tell that wasn't what he wanted to hear. He got all worked up, and for a second I thought he was going to try something. But my mom stepped in, putting her hand on his chest, telling him to calm down. She turned back to me with tears in her eyes and said, "Please, we need more time. We've got nowhere else to go." And then Rob's stepdaughter, the one who's 19, came out of the house crying. I hadn't even noticed her until she stepped onto the porch, clutching her stomach. That's when my mom blurted out, "She's pregnant! You can't do this to her! You can't kick us out when she's about to have a grandchild!" That hit me like a punch. I wasn't expecting that. For a moment, I just stood there, not really knowing what to say. It felt like they were pulling out every card they could to get me to change my mind. And I mean, yeah, I felt bad for her. She was young, and being pregnant is a lot to handle. But at the same time, I knew I couldn't let that change things. I took a deep breath and told them, "Look, I'm sorry she's going through that, but this is still my house. You have 2 weeks. I'm not asking you to leave today." My mom started sobbing, and Rob just stood there, looking like he was ready to explode. It got to a point where I just couldn't stand being there anymore. I told them, "I've made my decision. I need this place back. I'll come by in 2 weeks to check in." And then I walked out. It wasn't easy. I could hear my mom still yelling as I left, calling me heartless and selfish, and saying she couldn't believe her own son would do this to her. But I had to keep walking. If I stayed there any longer, I knew I'd start second-guessing myself, and I couldn't afford to do that. When I got back to my grandparents' place, I tried to focus on my plans for the renovations. I pulled up all the paperwork, went over my notes, and tried to keep my head clear. But it was hard. I kept thinking about my mom and what she'd said. The guilt started creeping in. I mean, no one wants to be the bad guy, especially not when it comes to family. And then my phone started buzzing. It was one of my mom's relatives, an aunt I barely ever talked to. She was all like, "I heard what happened. And I just have to say, I'm disappointed in you. Your mom's in a tough spot, and you're making it worse." She kept going on about how I was being cruel and how I needed to help my mom out because that's what family does. It wasn't just her either. Over the next few days, I started getting calls and texts from other relatives, all saying the same thing. They were calling me selfish and saying I should give my mom more time, or even just let her stay. They acted like I was some villain in all this, like I was kicking her out for fun or something. No one seemed to get that this was about my future, too. At one point, my grandma noticed how stressed I was getting. She sat me down and said, "Listen, you did what you had to do. Don't let them guilt trip you into thinking you're wrong. Your dad left you this house for a reason." And that helped a little. It was good to have her on my side, but it didn't make the phone calls and messages any less annoying. The worst part was when one of my mom's relatives sent me this long message about how my mom was caught in the middle and that I needed to show compassion because she was trying to keep the peace. That one got under my skin. I wanted to reply and say, how is she caught in the middle when she's the one who chose them over me? But I didn't. I knew getting into it with them wouldn't help. It would just add fuel to the fire. So I started ignoring the calls and messages. I figured if they were so worried about my mom, they could help her out. They could offer her a place to stay or pitch in to find her a new spot. But none of them were doing that. It was easier for them to just blame me. Typical. As the days went by, I focused on my renovation plans. I met with the contractor, went over the details, and set up a timeline. I knew once I got things going, I'd have to face my mom and Rob again, and I wasn't looking forward to it. But I kept reminding myself that this was for me, for my future. I'd spent too long letting other people dictate what I could and couldn't do. It was time I took control. And honestly, despite all the drama, I started feeling a bit better about my decision. I knew deep down that I was doing what my dad would have wanted. He left me these properties so I could have a future, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me, not even my own mom. By the end of that first week, I'd stopped feeling as guilty. I knew I wasn't the one in the wrong here. I'd given them time, and I was being fair. If my mom and Rob wanted to make it harder than it needed to be, that was on them. I just had to stay strong and stick to my plan. By the time the 2 weeks were up, I knew I had to face them again. I spent those days preparing myself, mentally going over what I was going to say when the time came. I mean, part of me hoped they'd have found somewhere else by then and would just quietly move out, but I knew that was probably too much to ask for. The way things had been going, I had a feeling they were going to push back, try to make it as difficult as possible. The day I went back to the house, I pulled up to the driveway, and sure enough, there was my mom, Rob, and even a few of their friends and relatives standing around. It was like they were putting on a show or something. My stomach dropped, but I knew I had to stay calm. If I let them see me stressed, they'd just use that to push me more. As I walked up, my mom came rushing over, tears streaming down her face. She went straight into this whole emotional speech, saying, "I can't believe you'd really do this to us. You're my son. How could you turn your back on me when I need you the most?" It was the kind of thing that, if I hadn't been so prepared for it, would have really gotten to me. But I'd spent days thinking about it, replaying her words in my head, so I just stayed calm. I told her, "Mom, I gave you 2 weeks. That's fair and you know it. This is my house and I have every right to take it back." She kept shaking her head, saying I was being unreasonable and that 2 weeks wasn't enough time. But I knew that wasn't true. If they'd really tried, they could have found something, or at least made some progress. It felt like they were just stalling, hoping that if they pushed hard enough, I'd back down. Then Rob jumped in, all fired up like he was ready for a fight. He was like, "This is our home. You can't just show up and take it from us like this." I could feel the tension rising, but I kept my voice steady and said, "Actually, I can. Legally, it's my property. I've been more than patient, and now it's time for you to move out." I could see the anger in his eyes, but he didn't have a response to that. He knew I was right. That's when the relatives got involved. One of my mom's cousins stepped forward and started going off about how family is supposed to stick together, and how I was acting like a landlord instead of a son. She said stuff like, "Your mom has done so much for you, and now you're just abandoning her?" It felt like everyone was ganging up on me, trying to make me feel like the worst person in the world. I took a deep breath and told her, "I understand you're trying to help, but this isn't your business. My dad left me this house for a reason, and I'm doing what I have to do." I could tell that didn't go over well because she just scoffed and turned away, muttering something about how I was heartless. At that point, I realized this wasn't going to be a quick conversation. They were all just waiting for me to crack, hoping I'd feel bad enough to change my mind. But I knew if I gave in now, they'd never leave. It would just be more excuses, more drama, and more pressure. I had to stand my ground no matter how bad it felt. My mom started crying even harder, saying things like, "I don't know where we'll go. We have no money saved up for this." I had to bite my tongue to stop myself from saying what I was really thinking, which was maybe you should have thought of that before letting this go on for so long. But I knew that wouldn't help. Instead, I just said, I'm sorry, but I need this space back. You have to find another option. She switched tactics then, asking if she could have a little more time. Just one more month, she said, her voice all shaky. We'll definitely find something by then. I almost felt myself wavering for a second, but then I remembered how she'd used that same tone before. It was always about getting more time, more leeway, but nothing ever really changed. If I gave her another month, I'd be in the exact same spot when that time ran out. So I told her, I've already given you the time I could. I can't wait any longer. Rob, of course, started ranting again about how I was kicking them out with nowhere to go, but I just kept repeating myself. This is my house. I'm taking it back. Over and over like a broken record because I knew they were trying to wear me down. Then Rob's stepdaughter, the one who's pregnant, came out onto the porch, holding her stomach and looking like she was about to burst into tears. She said, Please, we don't have anywhere to go. I'm about to have a baby. We need a roof over our heads. And man, that one was rough. It's hard not to feel something when you see a scared pregnant teenager begging you for help. But I reminded myself that it wasn't my responsibility. It sucked, but I had to focus on what was best for me. I said, I'm really sorry, but I've given as much time as I can. I hope you find somewhere soon. And with that, I turned and walked away. My mom called after me, screaming about how she'd never forgive me for this, but I kept walking. I knew if I stopped, if I turned around and saw her face again, I'd start to doubt myself. When I got back to my car, I felt this mix of emotions. Part of me felt relieved, like I'd finally taken control and made the decision I needed to. But another part of me felt like absolute garbage. It's one thing to tell yourself you're doing the right thing, but it's a whole other thing to feel it when everyone around you is saying you're wrong. I sat in my car for a while, just trying to breathe and not let everything sink in too much. I knew they were angry, and I knew they were probably talking behind my back, but I had to keep telling myself that I was doing what I needed to for my future. My dad left me these properties for a reason, and I wasn't going to let guilt and pressure ruin that. When I finally drove off, I felt a bit lighter. It wasn't easy, and I knew there'd be more backlash to come, but I'd taken the first step. I'd stood my ground, and now it was up to them to figure things out. I wasn't going to let them drag me down with their problems. I had plans, and I was going to stick to them, no matter how many people tried to guilt trip me. The rest of the day, I focused on my renovation plans. I set up meetings with the contractor, went over the designs, and started getting things in motion. It felt good, like I was finally moving forward with my life. Yeah, there was still that weight of everything that happened, but I knew I'd done the right thing. I wasn't going to let anyone tell me otherwise. My wife kicked me out after her son's lies. 3 weeks later, she asked if I'd reflected. I handed her divorce papers, and her son's entire scheme collapsed. Hey Reddit, my stepson spent months destroying my marriage with calculated lies. When his mom finally asked me to come home and apologize, I showed up with evidence that ended everything. What followed was absolute chaos. But before I get to that beautiful disaster, let me set the scene. I'm standing in my driveway at 4 p.m. on a Tuesday, watching my clothes fly out of the second-story window like confetti at the world's worst parade. My wife Lauren is screaming from up there, her face red with rage I've never seen before. She's telling me to get out of her house. Except it's not her house, it's mine. But we'll get to that later. Just this morning we were having breakfast together. Just this morning everything seemed fine. Now her 17-year-old son Jake is standing behind her with this look on his face. Something between triumph and fake concern. He's got his hand on her shoulder like he's comforting her, playing the devoted son. But his eyes meet mine for just a second through that window, and I swear I see a smirk. That smirk told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't teenage drama. This was calculated, planned, and executed perfectly by a kid who'd been playing chess while I was playing checkers. Let me back up and explain how a normal Tuesday morning turned into the day my marriage imploded. I'm Derek, 38 years old. I work in industrial equipment sales, the kind of boring job that pays well but makes people's eyes glaze over at parties when you explain what you do. Been with the same company for 12 years? Steady income, decent benefits, zero drama. The most exciting part of my week is usually deciding which sandwich shop to hit for lunch. I met Lauren 4 years ago at a coffee shop where she worked as a manager. She was beautiful, kind, and a widow who'd lost her husband to illness 3 years prior. Her son Jake was 13 then, a quiet kid who seemed lost without his father. I understood that. Losing a parent at that age leaves marks. I fell for Lauren pretty much immediately. She had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room when she talked to you. We dated for 8 months before I proposed, and she said yes with tears in her eyes. I promised both of them I'd never try to replace Jake's father, but I'd be there for them. Always. I meant it too. The first 2 years were honestly great. Jake was distant with me, sure, but I understood. I never pushed, never demanded he call me dad or anything like that. I helped him with homework when he asked, drove him to his friends' houses, paid for his phone and clothes without keeping score. When we got married, I bought us a bigger house so Jake could have his own space. A proper bedroom, not the cramped room he'd had at Lauren's old apartment. Lauren was happy. We were happy. I thought Jake was adjusting. Looking back now with perfect hindsight, I can see exactly when things started to shift. When the poison started dripping into our marriage, slow and steady, like water eroding stone. About 9 months ago, Jake started making these little comments to his mother. I'd hear them sometimes when I walked into a room. Little things that sounded sweet on the surface, but had this edge underneath that made my skin crawl. He'd tell her how beautiful she was, how she could be a model, how she deserved someone who treated her like a queen. At first, I thought it was just a kid complimenting his mom. Sweet, right? Then he'd bring up his dead father. Whenever Lauren and I set any kind of boundary, curfew, homework requirements, basic house rules, Jake would drop some variation of, Dad would have let me do this, or Dad understood me better. Lauren would shut it down at first, firmly telling him that I was good to them, and that comparing wasn't fair. But the comments kept coming, subtle and constant, wearing her down bit by bit. He'd question why they had to follow my rules in what he called their house. Never mind that I'd bought the house, that my name was on the deed, that I paid the mortgage every month without complaint. In Jake's version of reality, this was their house, and I was just living in it. I tried talking to Lauren about it, suggested maybe Jake was having trouble adjusting, that we should consider family therapy. She waved it off as typical teenage drama and told me I was being too sensitive, but I noticed her looking at me differently sometimes, like she was studying me, searching for something, like Jake's words were planting seeds of doubt that were starting to sprout. Then about 4 months ago, things got weirder in a way that made me feel genuinely crazy. Jake would be this completely different person depending on whether his mother was in the room. When Lauren was around, he'd be laughing and joking with me, acting like we were buddies, calling me by my first name in this friendly way, asking about my day, seeming genuinely interested in my boring equipment sales stories. But the absolute second Lauren left the room, like the instant she was out of earshot, his face would go blank, completely neutral, like someone had flipped a switch and turned off his personality. I'd try to engage with him, suggest activities we could do together, and he'd give me flat one-word responses while staring at his phone. Then Lauren would come back and boom. Animated, friendly, Jake would reappear like nothing happened. I started feeling insane, like I was imagining the whole thing or reading too much into normal teenage moodiness. But the pattern was too consistent, too deliberate. This kid was performing for his mother and dropping the act the second she wasn't watching. The real explosion, the beginning of the end, started 3 months ago when Jake asked me for a car. Not just any car, a $35,000 BMW like his friend Tyler had gotten for his 17th birthday. He showed me pictures on his phone, talking about how all his friends had nice cars and how he was embarrassed to have me drive him places in my old work truck. My truck was 3 years old and perfectly fine, but apparently it wasn't good enough for Jake's image. I sat him down at the kitchen table and tried to be reasonable. Explained that $35,000 was too much money for a teenager's first car. Told him we could find a reliable used car for around $10,000, something safe and dependable. Suggested he could get a part-time job to help with insurance payments, teach him some responsibility. He stared at me like I'd just suggested he walk everywhere barefoot. Then his face crumpled and he ran to his room where I could hear him crying. Loud, dramatic sobs that carried through the entire house. That night, Lauren was ice cold, questioning whether it was really necessary to deny him, pointing out everything Jake had been through, losing his father, having to adjust to a new family, asking if it would really kill me to just give him this one thing. I was shocked. 35 grand for a teenager's first car was objectively insane. I told her that, tried to explain basic financial responsibility. She turned away from me in bed and said, I didn't understand what it was like to be his mother. After that incident, everything changed. Like someone had flipped a switch in our marriage, and suddenly, I was the enemy. Jake started having these whispered conversations with Lauren that would stop abruptly when I entered rooms. I'd walk into the kitchen, and they'd both go quiet, looking at me like I'd interrupted something important. Lauren would give me this tight smile and change the subject, but the damage was done. She began questioning me out of nowhere. asking if I really liked Jake, why he felt like I was different when she wasn't around, whether I resented having him in our lives. Every time I tried to defend myself, she'd counter with, "Why would my son lie about this?" And that's the trap, right? How do you defend yourself against vague accusations? How do you prove you didn't say something mean or give someone a certain look? Jake was making claims that were impossible to disprove, building this narrative of me as a two-faced jerk who only showed his true colors when we were alone. The fights became regular occurrences. At least twice a week, Lauren would confront me about something Jake had said, that I'd snapped at him for leaving dishes in the sink, that I'd made a comment about his grades, that I'd rolled my eyes when he asked for something. None of it was true, but every time I tried to defend myself, Lauren would ask if I was calling her son a liar. And what was I supposed to say to that? I realized pretty quickly that Jake was playing this perfectly, never making accusations so specific I could disprove them, but consistent enough that Lauren started believing the pattern. He was building a case against me, one small lie at a time. Then 2 weeks ago, everything exploded in the absolute worst way possible. I came home from work around 6 p.m., tired from dealing with a difficult client all day. Lauren was waiting by the door, and the look on her face made my stomach drop. She grabbed my arm, not gentle, not affectionate, grabbed it hard enough that I knew something was very wrong. Her voice was shaking as she told me we needed to talk about what happened with Jake. I had no idea what she was talking about. I'd been at work since 7 that morning, hadn't even seen Jake. She pulled me into the living room where Jake was sitting on the couch, and my confusion turned to panic when I saw his face. He looked scared, actually frightened, eyes wide and a bit red like he'd been crying. Lauren pulled up Jake's sleeve to show me a bruise on his forearm, dark purple, about the size of a hand. She had tears in her eyes as she said Jake told her I'd grabbed him that morning, that I'd been getting aggressive when she wasn't home, that he was scared to be alone with me. My world tilted. The room seemed to spin as I tried to process what she was saying. I have never, ever laid a hand on that kid. Never. Not once in 4 years. I was shouting now, desperate, telling her it wasn't true, that I'd never touched him, that I'd been at work all day, that she could check the timestamps on my badge swipes at the office if she didn't believe me. But she stepped back from me like I was dangerous, like I was some stranger who'd just threatened her. She told me she hadn't wanted to believe Jake, that for months he'd been telling her things, and she told herself he was just being a dramatic teenager. But the things he was saying were too specific, too consistent to ignore anymore. I grabbed her hands, begging her to really think about whether she'd ever seen me be violent in 4 years together, to consider that maybe something else was going on here. She pulled away and said that was what made it so scary, that Jake claimed I was like 2 different people. That's when I saw him, Jake still sitting on the couch, watching this entire scene unfold. For just a split second, maybe half a second, his expression was completely neutral, almost curious, like he was watching a science experiment to see how it would turn out. Then he saw me looking, and his face instantly crumpled into fear. He ran to his mother, calling for her, saying he'd heard yelling and begging her not to let me hurt her. That performance was what broke Lauren completely. She told me to pack a bag and leave, said she needed time to figure things out and make sure her son was safe, that I needed to get out of the house until she could think clearly. I packed with shaking hands, my mind reeling, throwing clothes into trash bags because I couldn't find my suitcase. As I loaded my car in the driveway, I looked up one more time and saw them in the upstairs window. Jake had his arm around his mother, comforting her like the devoted son. But when he thought I couldn't see his face clearly through the glass, I caught him looking down at his phone and smiling. That smile confirmed what I already knew in my gut. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a troubled kid acting out. This was calculated, planned, executed. And as I drove to my brother's house with my entire life in trash bags in my back seat, one question kept hammering in my mind. How long had this 17-year-old been planning to destroy my marriage? And more importantly, why? I spent the first week at my brother Dave's house in complete shock, barely eating, barely sleeping, just replaying everything over and over like a broken film reel. Trying to find the moment I'd missed, the warning sign I should have seen. Dave kept telling me to fight back, to call Lauren, to make her listen. But what was the point? She'd already decided I was the monster in this story. No amount of talking would change that. I called her maybe 50 times that first week. Every single call went straight to voicemail. I texted her, begging for a chance to talk, to explain, to show her that something was very wrong with this situation. She never responded. By the second week, the shock started wearing off and something else took its place. Something cold and analytical. I started thinking about all those little moments over the past months. connecting dots I hadn't even known were there. Jake's perfect performance on the stairs. That split second of curiosity before he put on his terrified act. That was too smooth to be his first time. He'd practiced that. The bruise on his arm that appeared at the perfect time, right after our biggest fight about the car. Too convenient. Those whispered conversations with Lauren that stopped when I entered rooms. What had he been filling her head with all those months? I realized I needed help. Real professional help. Professional. Because if Jake had been manipulating this situation the whole time, I needed proof. Solid, undeniable proof. I called a lawyer first. A family law attorney named Patricia Thompson, who came highly recommended from a guy at work who'd gone through a messy divorce. She listened to my story without interrupting, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, she looked at me seriously and asked one question. Do you own the house? I told her yes. I'd bought it before the marriage with my own money. My name was the only one on the deed. She nodded and said that was good, that it gave me leverage, but we needed to move quickly on divorce paperwork if that's what I wanted. I told her I wasn't sure yet. That part of me still hoped Lauren would come to her senses. Patricia gave me this sad smile and said, in my experience, when someone chooses to believe the worst about you without evidence, they've already made their choice. That hit me hard, but I knew she was right. Then I did something that felt crazy but necessary. I hired a tech consultant, a guy named Brandon who'd helped Dave's company recover data after a cyber attack. I explained the situation and asked if there was any way to legally access Jake's digital footprint. Brandon didn't seem surprised at all. Teenagers leave digital trails everywhere, he said. Social media, cloud storage, messaging apps. If he's been planning this, there's evidence somewhere. Question is whether we can access it legally. He explained that as a minor living in my house, technically still my house since I owned it, there were legal gray areas around accessing devices and accounts, especially if I could make a case for concern about his well-being. It felt invasive. It felt wrong, but I needed to know the truth. Let me look into your phone records first, Brandon suggested. See what we can pull from your family plan. No hacking required for that. It's your account. It took Brandon less than a week to find the first bombshell. He called me on a Thursday evening, his voice tense. You need to see this. Can you come to my office? I drove over immediately. Brandon had printouts spread across his desk. Phone records, bank statements he'd helped me pull from accounts I had legal access to. Our joint account, the one Lauren and I had set up for household expenses and savings, had been bleeding money for almost 6 months. $8,000 in total, withdrawn in increments small enough that I hadn't noticed while working 60-hour weeks and trusting my wife to manage the household finances. The charges were for gaming equipment, expensive clothes, electronics, food delivery sometimes twice a day. All of it tied back to Jake's spending. But here's what made my blood run cold. Lauren had to have known. Several of the charges required parental approval for a minor. Bank statements showed she'd transferred money from our savings to cover overdrafts Jake had created. She'd been hiding it from me, covering for him, probably because she knew I'd say no to that kind of frivolous spending. Brandon found something else too. He pulled our credit report, perfectly legal since it was my credit, and found that Lauren had applied for a credit card in just her name 2 months ago, right around when Jake's campaign against me had intensified. She'd maxed it out almost immediately. Another $4,000, mostly on stuff for Jake. When Brandon showed me everything, I felt physically sick. This wasn't just Jake manipulating his mother. Lauren had been actively deceiving me too, choosing her son over our marriage and our financial future. There's more, Brandon said, pulling up something on his laptop. Your family phone plan includes cloud backup for all devices. Jake's phone has been backing up to your account this whole time. He showed me the data. Deleted text messages that had been automatically backed up before Jake erased them from his phone. Messages between Jake and his friends going back almost a year, talking about his plan. Mom's starting to doubt him, one message from 8 months ago said. Just gotta push a little harder, and the old man's gone. In another conversation from 6 months ago, Jake had literally written out his strategy to a friend named Tyler. Mom always believes me when I cry. It's so easy. There were messages about the car too, about how I was a cheap jerk who didn't understand that Jake deserved nice things. About how once I was gone, his mom would finally sell that boring house and they could move to the city where Tyler and his other friends lived. But the worst message, the one that made everything crystal clear, was from 3 weeks ago, right before everything exploded. Almost there, Jake had written to Tyler. Got the bruise ready. Going to show Mom tonight. This should be the final nail. He'd planned the bruise. He'd deliberately hurt himself to frame me. I need you to see something else, Brandon said quietly. clicking on a video file. This was in his cloud storage, probably recorded by accident. Looks like he meant to take a photo but hit video instead. The video showed Jake in his bathroom, alone. He was looking at his forearm, then deliberately slamming it against the edge of the bathroom counter, wincing but doing it again, and again, until a dark bruise started forming. "This better work," he muttered to himself in the video. I sat there watching this 17-year-old kid abuse himself to destroy my marriage, and I felt physically sick. What kind of person does this? What had I done to deserve this level of calculated cruelty? Brandon showed me more messages. Conversations between Jake and Tyler about their plan for after the divorce. "Once they split, Mom will want to leave this boring town," Jake had written. "She'll sell the house and we can finally move to the city where everything actually happens. Plus, without him around, she'll have more money to spend on me." It was all about money and location. Jake wanted a different life, a more exciting life in the city, where his friends had moved after graduation, and I was the obstacle. The house was in my name, so Lauren couldn't sell it while we were married. But if we divorced, Jake figured she'd want a fresh start somewhere else. He'd finally get what he wanted, and I'd be erased from their lives like I'd never existed. I had everything now. The financial fraud, the manipulative messages, the video of him creating the bruise, all of it, backed up and documented and completely legal since it was all from accounts and devices on my family plan. Patricia Thompson looked over everything and told me this was more than enough for a divorce with a very favorable settlement. "This is actually one of the clearest cases of fraud and manipulation I've seen," she said. "The video alone is damning." She warned me, though, that exposing Jake's manipulation might damage my relationship with Lauren permanently. I almost laughed. What relationship? The woman had thrown me out based on lies, without even giving me a chance to defend myself. She'd chosen her son over 4 years of marriage without a second thought. That night, 3 weeks after she'd kicked me out, I finally got a text from Lauren. "Have you had time to think about your behavior?" it read. "Jake says he's willing to give you another chance if you apologize to him and commit to doing better. We can talk about you coming home if you've really reflected on what you've done." I stared at that message for a long time. She wasn't asking if I was okay. She wasn't apologizing for not hearing my side. She was demanding I apologize to the kid who'd orchestrated this entire nightmare. The kid who'd stolen $8,000. The kid who'd bruised himself to frame me for abuse. The kid who'd been planning my removal from their lives for almost a year. I texted back just 4 words, "Come over tomorrow, 3 p.m. She responded immediately, "Does this mean you're ready to make things right?" I didn't answer. Instead, I spent the rest of the night organizing all the evidence into a folder, printing out the messages, the bank statements, the credit card bills, everything. Brandon had even put the video on a USB drive for me. Tomorrow, Lauren was going to learn the truth about her son, and our marriage was going to end. There was no coming back from this. Lauren arrived at the coffee shop at exactly 3 p.m. I'd chosen this location deliberately. Neutral territory, public space, plenty of witnesses. I wanted her to see everything with other people around, so she couldn't make a scene or accuse me of intimidating her. I watched her through the window as she parked. She looked tired, thinner than I remembered, with dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. For a moment, I felt a pang of something like the love I'd had for her. Then I remembered 3 weeks of silence. The accusations. The way she'd chosen to believe the worst of me without question. She walked in with this expression on her face, half hopeful, half nervous, probably expecting me to be broken and apologetic, ready to beg for forgiveness. The coffee shop was busy enough for privacy, but not so empty we were alone. I'd positioned myself at a corner table where I could see the parking lot through the window. She slid into the seat across from me with a cautious smile and immediately started talking about how she and Jake had been discussing things. How maybe if I was willing to go to therapy and work on my anger issues, we could find a way forward. I let her talk for about 30 seconds before I held up my hand to stop her. Then I slid a large manila folder across the table. She looked at it, confused, then back at me. "Open it," I said flatly. She hesitated, then picked up the folder with shaking hands. The first thing she saw was the divorce paperwork. Official, stamped by the courthouse, already signed by my lawyer. Her face went white. She looked up at me with genuine shock, starting to say, "We can work through—" "Keep looking," I interrupted. She flipped through pages. I watched her face change as she saw the bank statements, the credit card bills, the highlighted charges showing $8,000 of our money spent by Jake over 6 months. "I can explain," she started. "Keep going." Then she got to the printed messages. Jake's conversations with his friends where he'd laid out his entire manipulation strategy. I saw the exact moment she read the words her son had written, about how easy it was to make her believe him, how the old man would be gone soon. Her hands started trembling. She kept shaking her head like she could deny what was right in front of her. "These can't be real," she whispered. "These could be faked." That's when I pulled out my phone and played the video. Volume low enough that only she could hear. Jake's voice came through clearly as he slammed his own arm against the bathroom counter over and over, creating the bruise he'd shown his mother. "This better work," his voice said from the phone. Lauren's face crumbled. She dropped the papers onto the table, her hand over her mouth, started mumbling about how he'd told her I grabbed him, how he'd cried, how he seemed so scared. "He played you," I said coldly. "For months, he systematically destroyed our marriage because he wanted you to sell my house and move to the city with him. It's all there in the messages." She was sobbing now, trying to keep quiet in the public space, her whole body shaking as she tried to process that her son had orchestrated this entire nightmare. "Why didn't you make me see?" she asked through tears. "Why didn't you tell me?" That question broke something in me. "I tried," I said, my voice hard. "I begged you to talk to me. I called you 50 times. You wouldn't even answer. You chose to believe Jake without evidence, without even asking for my side of the story. You threw me out of my own house based on lies." She reached across the table for my hand. I pulled back. "I was protecting my child," she said desperately. "What was I supposed to do?" "You were supposed to be my wife," I said, my voice rising slightly before I caught myself. "You were supposed to give me the benefit of the doubt after 4 years of marriage. You were supposed to ask questions, demand proof, something. But you didn't. Because deep down, you'd already chosen Jake over me. The truth hung in the air between us. She'd made her choice weeks ago, maybe months ago, when Jake's whispered poison first started working on her. I was just collateral damage." That's when the coffee shop door slammed open with force. Jake walked in. He'd apparently been waiting in the car outside and couldn't stand not knowing what was happening. He spotted us immediately and stormed over, his face red with anger. "What are you doing to my mom?" he demanded loudly enough that other customers looked over. Then he saw the papers scattered on the table. His expression changed for just a second, real fear flashing across his face before he tried to recover. "Whatever he's telling you is a lie," Jake said quickly to his mother. "He's trying to turn you against me. This is exactly what I warned you about." I picked up my phone and turned the screen toward him. The video of him creating the bruise was paused on the frame where you could clearly see his face. Jake's expression went through shock, panic, then settled on anger. "You went through my stuff," he said loudly. "You had no right. That's illegal. People were definitely watching us now. You framed me for abuse," I said calmly. "So I had every right." Lauren was staring at her son like she'd never seen him before. "Tell me it's not real," she begged him, her voice breaking. "Tell me you didn't do this." And that's when Jake's mask finally came off completely. "So what if I did?" he said, his voice getting louder. "You were miserable with him anyway. He's boring and cheap, and he's not my dad. We should have left this stupid town a year ago." Lauren gasped like she'd been physically struck, her eyes darting around at the other customers who were now openly staring. Jake kept going, seemingly not caring about the audience. All his friends had moved to the city after graduating, he said. He was stuck here because of me. She deserved better than this boring life, they both did. Once she divorced me and sold the house, they could finally have a real life. "It's my house," I interrupted quietly. "Lauren can't sell it." His face went even redder. He started talking about lawsuits, about how his friend's mom had gotten half of everything in her divorce, about how there were laws. That's when I saw it. The moment Lauren finally understood what her son had become. Right there in the middle of a crowded coffee shop, she whispered, "You destroyed my marriage for money and a change of location? You made me believe my husband was abusing you so we could move to be near your friends?" Jake tried to backtrack, suddenly aware of all the people watching. Started stammering that it wasn't like that he just wanted them to be happy together, without me ruining everything. I cut through it all. "You have 30 days to find a place," I said firmly but quietly. "It's stated in the divorce papers. After that, I'm taking back my house." Lauren looked at me with such devastation. "Please," she begged, "give me time to process this, to fix what's broken." But I was done. "There's nothing to fix," I said. "You chose to believe I was a monster without evidence. You let your son manipulate you for months and never once questioned it. Even now, knowing the truth, you're asking me for another chance. But you never gave me a first chance." She broke down completely, sobbing into her hands, while Jake stood there with his arms crossed, looking defiant and angry, even though his entire scheme had collapsed around him. I looked at them, This mother and son who destroyed my trust in my marriage, and felt nothing but emptiness where love used to be. I stood up from the table, gathered my copy of the divorce papers, and told them again, 30 days, then you're out of my house. Lauren tried to grab my arm. I pulled away gently and walked toward the exit. Behind me, I could hear Lauren's sobs, and Jake starting to argue with her, his voice rising again, as he probably tried to spin this somehow. Make it my fault. I walked out of that coffee shop, got in my car, and through the window I could see them still at the table. Lauren with her head in her hands, crying while Jake gestured angrily, probably still blaming me for everything even as the evidence of his manipulation sat right there in front of them. A month later, my lawyer called to confirm they'd moved out on time. They'd found a small 2-bedroom apartment across town, nothing like the house they'd left behind. Patricia mentioned that Lauren had tried to fight for some financial settlement, but she had no legal ground to stand on. The house was mine before the marriage, bought with my money, and she'd been complicit in the theft of $8,000 from our joint account. Dave told me through mutual friends that Lauren was devastated, barely functioning at work, that Jake was making her life miserable, blaming her for not moving faster, for not selling the house somehow, for ruining his plan. Their relationship was apparently strained to the breaking point. Jake was treating her with the same manipulative contempt he'd shown me now that his scheme had failed, and he was stuck in the same boring town he'd tried so hard to escape. Part of me felt sad about it sometimes, late at night when my house was too quiet, and I'd remember the good times before Jake's poison had taken root. But mostly I felt relief, like I dodged something that would have eventually destroyed me completely. You can't build a marriage with someone who doesn't trust you, and you can't love someone who'll throw you away the moment it becomes convenient. I'd learned the hardest lesson of my life, one that cost me 4 years and a marriage I thought would last forever. YouTube just dropped this new hype feature. If you're hooked on this story, smash that hype button. It tells YouTube this video deserves to blow up, and it keeps even crazier stories coming your way. My parents canceled my birthday every year because my brother's travel tournaments were more important. So I quietly stopped showing up to family events. No one noticed until photos from my private beachfront wedding went viral, and they realized they weren't invited. Hey Reddit, buckle up because this is going to be a long one, but I promise the ending is worth it. This is the story of how I spent nearly 2 decades being invisible in my own family, quietly built an incredible life without them, and watched them absolutely lose their minds when my beachfront wedding went viral and they realized they were the only ones not there. I, 28 male, grew up in a small town in Ohio with my parents and my younger brother Gavin, 26 male. From the outside, we probably looked like the picture-perfect American family. Nice house in the suburbs, 2 kids, a golden retriever named Biscuit, the whole Norman Rockwell fantasy. But behind closed doors, there was a pretty obvious hierarchy in our family, and I was at the absolute bottom of it. Gavin was a travel baseball player, and not just any travel baseball player. According to my parents, he was destined to be the next Mike Trout, the next Bryce Harper, the chosen one who would deliver our family name to athletic glory and probably make them millions in endorsement deals. Spoiler alert, he never made it past community college ball, but I am getting ahead of myself. From the moment Gavin started showing promise in Little League around age 8, our entire family existence revolved around his baseball schedule. Every weekend was a tournament somewhere. Every weeknight was practice. Every dinner conversation was about his batting average or his fielding percentage or which scout supposedly looked at him during warm-ups. My parents invested easily over $200,000 over the years in travel teams, private coaching, specialized equipment, training facilities, and tournament fees. That is not an exaggeration. I saw the credit card statements once when I was 16, and I nearly choked. Meanwhile, I existed somewhere in the background of all this athletic worship. I was a good student, made honor roll every semester, won science fair competitions, got accepted into the National Honor Society. But none of that mattered because it did not involve a ball or a bat, or my parents sitting in bleachers, feeling like big shots in front of the other travel ball parents. The thing that really stung, though, was not the lack of attention to my achievements. I could have lived with that. What really messed me up was my birthday. I was born on July 14th. For those of you who do not know, July is peak travel baseball season. Tournaments every single weekend, sometimes lasting 3 or 4 days. And every single year, without fail, my birthday got canceled because it conflicted with one of Gavin's tournaments. Let me be crystal clear about what I mean by canceled. I do not mean they forgot. I do not mean they rescheduled to a different day. I mean they would look me in the eyes and tell me that we would do something for my birthday later, and then later would never come. The tournament would end, And suddenly there was another tournament the next weekend. Then baseball camps. Then fall ball. Then showcase events. And by the time things slowed down, it was October, and my birthday was ancient history. One year, I think I was turning 11, I asked if we could at least get a cake before we left for Gavin's tournament in Indiana. My mom sighed like I had asked her to solve world hunger and said, "We just do not have time, sweetie. Maybe we can find something at the hotel." We did not find something at the hotel. We found a vending machine Snickers bar that my dad tossed me and said, "Happy birthday, champ." I ate it in the back seat of our minivan while watching my brother warm up for his first game. Another year, I was turning 14, and I made the mistake of asking if maybe I could stay home with my grandma instead of going to the tournament. I did not want to cause problems. I just wanted to spend my birthday doing something other than sitting in 95-degree heat watching baseball for 12 hours. My dad looked at me like I had suggested burning the American flag. "This is a family," he said. "We support each other. Your brother needs us there." What about what I needed? That question never occurred to anyone. The worst one was when I turned 16. In most families, 16 is a big deal. Sweet 16 and all that. Driver's license territory. Coming of age stuff. I made the cardinal sin of actually believing my parents when they said we would definitely do something special for my 16th birthday. I was so naive. I actually invited a few friends over for what I thought was going to be a small party at our house. My parents forgot to mention they had signed Gavin up for a last-minute elite showcase tournament in Georgia that same weekend. The same weekend as my 16th birthday party that they had agreed to. I found out 2 days before when my mom casually mentioned we needed to pack for Georgia. I had to call all my friends and cancel. I had to explain that actually, my family was leaving town, and I could not have a party anymore. Do you know how humiliating that is at 16? Some of those friends never really looked at me the same way again. I became the kid whose family clearly did not care enough to let him have a birthday party. My parents promised they would make it up to me. They would throw me an even bigger party when we got back. They would get me an even better cake. They would make it the best birthday ever. They promised all these things while loading the car with Gavin's baseball bags and coolers full of Gatorade. We got back from Georgia. Gavin's team won the tournament. There was a celebration dinner at his favorite restaurant. My birthday was never mentioned again. I want to be really clear about something. This was not just about the birthdays. That was the most obvious symptom, but the disease ran way deeper. Every single decision our family made revolved around Gavin's schedule and Gavin's needs and Gavin's comfort. Vacations? We went to places within driving distance of a baseball facility so Gavin could get some practice time in. Holidays? Structured around tournament schedules and recovery time. Family dinners? Dominated by baseball talk, scouting discussions, college recruitment strategy. I would sit there eating my meatloaf while my parents analyzed Gavin's swing mechanics like they were ESPN commentators. I remember one Thanksgiving when I was 13. I had just found out I won the district science fair with a project about water filtration systems. I was so excited to tell everyone at dinner. I waited for a break in the Gavin baseball hour to share my news. Finally got my opening and said, "I won first place at the science fair." You know what my mom said? "That is nice, honey. Gavin, tell your father about what Coach Peterson said about your arm strength." That is nice. 3 words and a pivot. That was the extent of celebration I got for winning a district competition. When Gavin won literally anything baseball related, it was a whole event. Trophies got displayed in the living room. Photos got framed and hung on walls. Neighbors got told. Extended family got called. But my achievements? Those got acknowledged with a nod and then filed away somewhere nobody would ever look at them again. I found all my science fair ribbons and academic awards in a shoebox in the garage a few years later, just tossed in there with old Christmas ornaments and broken tools. Meanwhile, Gavin had an entire wall in his bedroom dedicated to his baseball accomplishments, an actual shrine. That is when I started to really understand my position in the family. I was not the neglected child exactly. I was fed and clothed and had a roof over my head, but I was furniture, background noise. The other kid they had to acknowledge occasionally, but never had to actually see. Something shifted in me after that 16th birthday disaster. I stopped expecting things to change. I stopped hoping my parents would suddenly see me. I stopped trying to compete with a brother who had a permanent spotlight I could never touch. Instead, I got strategic. I realized that if I wanted a good life, I was going to have to build it myself, without any help from the family that treated me like an afterthought. So I put my head down and I worked. I maintained my 4.0 GPA. I joined every extracurricular that would look good on a college application. I applied for every scholarship I could find. I became obsessed with creating an escape route. Senior year of high school, I applied to 14 different colleges. I got into 11 of them, including several with significant scholarship offers. I chose a state school about 4 hours away from home that offered me a full academic ride plus a small stipend for living expenses. My parents barely noticed. They were too busy touring colleges with Gavin, who was being recruited for baseball by some Division II schools. I left for college in August. My parents drove me there, unloaded my stuff in about 45 minutes, and left to get back home in time for Gavin's showcase game that night. No tearful goodbye, no walking around campus together, no parent orientation, just a quick hug and a "call us if you need anything" that we all knew was just a formality. College was the first time in my life I felt like I could breathe. Nobody there knew I was the forgotten son. Nobody compared me to my brother. I was just Ethan, a blank slate, a fresh start. I majored in accounting and minored in finance. I know that sounds boring, but I loved the precision of numbers. I loved that there were right answers and wrong answers. I loved that success in accounting was based on skill and work ethic, not on whether your parents showed up to cheer for you. I graduated summa cum laude in 4 years, while Gavin bounced around community college, struggling to maintain eligibility for the baseball team that was definitely not a pipeline to the majors, like my parents had convinced themselves. His fastball topped out at 84 miles per hour, which is decent for a casual player, but nowhere near professional level. The dreams of MLB stardom quietly faded, though my parents never quite accepted it. After graduation, I got a job at an accounting firm in North Carolina. I chose North Carolina specifically because it was far enough from Ohio that surprise family visits were unlikely, but close enough that I could not be accused of completely abandoning everyone. Not that anyone would have noticed if I moved to Antarctica. Over the next few years, I started something I call the slow fade. I did not make any big dramatic announcement about cutting off my family. I did not have a blowout fight or send a scathing letter. I just quietly stopped showing up to things. Family dinners? Sorry, work is crazy right now. Thanksgiving? Already made plans with friends. Christmas? I will try to make it, but no promises. Gavin's birthday parties that somehow still got priority treatment, even though he was a grown adult? Unfortunately, I have a deadline that week. I would send a generic gift card and a text message. I would make the occasional 5-minute phone call. I maintained the bare minimum required to avoid an obvious confrontation, but I stopped investing any emotional energy in people who had never invested any in me. And here is the crazy part. Nobody noticed. Nobody called me out for missing 3 Thanksgivings in a row. Nobody questioned why I had not been home for Christmas in 2 years. Nobody seemed to find it odd that they had not seen my face in person since I graduated college. My parents were still so wrapped up in Gavin's life that my absence barely registered. Gavin had moved back home after his baseball career fizzled out. He worked part-time at a sporting goods store and spent most of his energy chasing some vague idea of becoming a personal trainer, or maybe a coach. My parents still funded most of his existence, still went to his recreational league softball games like they were the World Series, still treated him like the golden child, even though his gold had seriously tarnished. I was not bitter about this, honestly. I had made peace with my position in the family hierarchy a long time ago. I was just done participating in a show where I was not even an extra. I was done being the audience member who paid for tickets but never got to sit down. Meanwhile, my life in North Carolina was actually pretty great. I worked my way up at the accounting firm from entry level to senior associate to manager. I bought a small condo. I made real friends who actually remembered my birthday. I started dating a woman named Olivia, who I met at a friend's cookout. She was a pediatric nurse with the most infectious laugh I had ever heard, and a zero-tolerance policy for family nonsense that made me feel seen in a way I had never experienced. I told Olivia everything about my childhood, the canceled birthdays, the invisible achievements, the constant second-place finish to a brother who did not even know he was competing with me. She listened to all of it without judgment, then looked me in the eyes and said, "Their loss. Seriously, they missed out on knowing someone incredible." Nobody had ever called me incredible before. Olivia came from a close-knit family that actually functioned like a family. Her parents had been married for 35 years and still held hands at the grocery store. They had Sunday dinners together, not because they had to, but because they genuinely wanted to spend time with each other. The first time I went to one of those dinners, I felt like an anthropologist studying an alien civilization. This is what normal looks like? Her mom asked me questions about my job and actually listened to the answers. Her dad talked to me about regular stuff like sports and movies. They included me in conversations instead of talking around me. I kept waiting for the catch, for the moment when they would pivot away from me to focus on someone more important. That moment never came. After a few months of dating Olivia, I realized I had not talked to my parents in almost 5 weeks. Not because I was avoiding them specifically, I just genuinely forgot they existed because my life was full of people who actually wanted me in it. When I mentioned this to Olivia, she raised her eyebrows and said, "That is kind of telling, do not you think?" Yeah, it really was. Olivia and I dated for 3 years before I proposed. I knew she was the one about 6 months in, but I wanted to do things right. I saved up for a ring she would love. I planned a proposal that was meaningful to us specifically. No flash mob, no social media stunt. Just the two of us on a hiking trail we loved, with a sunset view and a question I already knew the answer to. She said yes before I even finished asking. When we started planning the wedding, Olivia asked me a question I had been dreading. "So how involved do you want your family to be?" I thought about it for a long time. Part of me wanted to be the bigger person. Part of me thought maybe this could be a fresh start, a chance for my parents to finally show up for me during a moment that actually mattered. But then I remembered every broken promise, every canceled birthday, every time I sat invisible in the back seat while they cheered for someone else. "I do not want them there," I said, and I meant it. Olivia did not push back. She did not try to convince me to make peace or extend an olive branch. She just nodded and said, "Then they will not be there. This is our day." I cannot tell you how much that meant to me. She did not try to fix my family or play mediator or suggest that I was being too harsh. She trusted my experience and my judgment. She chose me. We decided to do a destination wedding in Costa Rica. Olivia had always wanted a beach wedding, and I had always wanted to do something completely different from the boring Ohio church weddings I had grown up seeing. Costa Rica was perfect, far enough away that it felt like an adventure, but easy enough to get to that our actual friends and chosen family could attend. We kept the guest list small, about 40 people total. Olivia's parents, her sister and brother-in-law, a handful of aunts and uncles and cousins who had welcomed me into their family with open arms. On my side, I invited my college roommate who had become my best friend, a few work colleagues who had become genuine friends, and my cousin Jamie, who was the only blood relative who had ever treated me like I mattered. No parents, no brother, no extended family from Ohio who had spent decades pretending I did not exist. The wedding itself was everything I never knew I needed. We got married on a private beach at sunset. The venue was this small boutique resort that specialized in intimate weddings. Palm trees everywhere, white sand, water so blue it looked photoshopped. Olivia walked down an aisle made of seashells and tropical flowers. The officiant was a local woman with the warmest voice who conducted the ceremony in both English and Spanish. I cried when I saw Olivia in her dress. I cried when I said my vows. I cried when she said hers. I am not ashamed of any of it. During the ceremony, I had this weird moment where I looked out at the small crowd of people who had traveled to Costa Rica to watch me get married. Every single person there had chosen to be there. Every single person there actually cared about me. There was no obligation or family duty or keeping up appearances. Just love. Pure and simple. Pure. My best friend Jake stood next to me as my best man. This guy had driven 4 hours to help me move into my first apartment after college because my parents could not be bothered. He was more of a brother to me than my actual brother ever was. Olivia's dad walked her down the aisle with tears streaming down his face. This man had welcomed me into his family from day one. He called me son without any hesitation. The reception was at a beachfront restaurant with fairy lights strung between palm trees and a live band playing acoustic covers of our favorite songs. There were maybe 40 of us total, but it felt like the whole world was celebrating with us. Olivia's dad gave a toast that made everyone laugh and cry at the same time. My best friend gave a speech about how I was the most loyal person he had ever known. Olivia's mom told me she was proud to officially call me her son. That one hit different. Proud. Son. 2 words I had wanted to hear my whole life from people who never said them. We danced until midnight. We ate cake on the beach. We watched the stars come out over the ocean and felt like the luckiest people alive. And here's the thing. Not for one single second did I think about my parents or my brother. Not during the ceremony, not during the reception, not during any of it. They were so far from my mind that they might as well have been fictional characters from a book I read a long time ago. One of Olivia's cousins was a semi-professional photographer, and she spent the whole weekend capturing candid shots of everything. The ceremony, the reception, the morning after brunch, random moments of us laughing with friends and walking on the beach and just being ridiculously happy. Those photos would later become very important. About 3 weeks after we got back from Costa Rica, Olivia posted some of the wedding photos on her social media. Nothing crazy, just a few shots of the ceremony and the beach and us looking disgustingly in love. She tagged the location and wrote something like, "Married the love of my life in paradise." Her cousin, the photographer, also posted a few shots on her professional photography page. Beautiful golden hour pictures of Olivia in her dress and me looking at her like she hung the moon. We did not think much of it. It was just wedding photos. Everyone posts wedding photos. But then something weird happened. The photos started getting shared. A lot. It started with one of those wedding inspiration accounts reposting the photographer's shots with credit. Then another bigger account shared it. Then another. Then somehow it ended up on one of those viral feel-good story pages with a caption about a dreamy Costa Rica beach wedding. And it just exploded. Within a week, those photos had been seen by literally millions of people. The photographer's page gained like 50,000 followers. Wedding blogs were reaching out asking for details about vendors and locations. It was insane. I thought it was just a weird internet moment that would fade quickly. Weddings go viral sometimes. We would get our 15 minutes, and then everything would go back to normal. Then my phone started blowing up. The first call came from my cousin Jamie, the only family member I had actually invited to the wedding. "Dude," she said, "have you checked Facebook today?" I had not. I barely use Facebook anymore. It is mostly just older relatives posting minion memes and political arguments. "Your mom is losing her mind," Jamie said. Like absolutely losing it. She posted this massive thing about how she found out her son got married from seeing photos on the internet. She is playing the victim hard. People are eating it up too. Lots of sad reacts and comments about how children these days have no respect. I felt my stomach drop a little, but also I felt strangely calm. I had known this moment would come eventually. I just did not expect it to come via viral wedding photos. I pulled up my mom's Facebook page. Sure enough, there was a novel-length post about how devastated she was to learn that her eldest son got married without telling his family. How she had found out because one of her coworkers shared a picture and said, "Wait, is not that your son?" How she had been crying for days. How she did not understand what she had done to deserve this. The comments were wild. Dozens of people validating her grief. "I am so sorry. Children can be so cruel. He will regret this when you are gone." How ungrateful. My dad had commented too. Just one line. "I did not raise my son to behave this way." Funny. I did not remember him raising me at all. Then I saw a post from Gavin. He had shared one of the viral wedding photos with his own commentary. Imagine finding out your brother got married because a stranger showed you a picture that went viral. Imagine knowing you were not even invited. That is what my family is dealing with right now. Family is supposed to be everything. Some people forget that. The comments under his post were even worse. That is so messed up. What kind of person does that to their own brother? Blood is thicker than water, man. He will be sorry when he realizes what he threw away. I scrolled through all of it with a weird detachment, like I was reading about characters in a story instead of my actual life. These people did not know me. They did not know my childhood. They only knew the carefully crafted victim narrative my family was spinning. My phone started ringing. Mom. Dad. Mom again. Unknown number that was probably a relative who got my contact info. I let them all go to voicemail. Then my mom sent a text. "Ethan, please call me. I am your mother. I deserve an explanation." Deserve. That word hit me like a truck. After all those years of canceled birthdays and broken promises and invisible achievements, she had the nerve to say she deserved something from me. I typed back one message. "You have had 28 years to show up for me. You chose not to. I am choosing the same." Then I blocked her number. Over the next few days, the drama continued to unfold online. My family kept posting, kept playing the victims, kept collecting sympathy from people who only knew their side of the story. And then something unexpected happened. My cousin Jamie went scorched earth. She posted her own lengthy response to my mom's viral pity party. She talked about being at my wedding and how beautiful it was. She talked about meeting Olivia's family and how warm and welcoming they were. And then she dropped the receipts. She posted screenshots of text conversations I had given her permission to share. Texts from my mom over the years, canceling birthday plans because of Gavin's tournaments. Texts from me asking if we could maybe celebrate my birthday a different week, only to be ignored. A text from my dad that literally said, "Gavin's showcase is more important than cake. You will understand when you are older." She wrote about being at one of my birthday dinners when I was 12 and watching my parents spend the entire time on the phone coordinating logistics for Gavin's upcoming tournament. She wrote about my 16th birthday party getting canceled and me having to call his friends in shame. She wrote one line that went viral itself. You do not get to spend 18 years treating someone like they are invisible, and then act shocked when they stop trying to be seen. The comments started shifting. People started asking questions. Wait, why did you cancel his birthdays? Why does one kid get a $200,000 investment in travel sports while the other gets a Snickers bar? Why is it that Ethan moved across the country and nobody noticed he was gone for years? Jamie also posted the text thread from my 16th birthday, the one where my mom casually informed me we were going to Georgia 2 days before my planned party, the one where I asked if maybe we could postpone Georgia by one day, the one where my dad responded, "The tournament bracket does not revolve around your social calendar. You will survive." That text in particular made people furious. You will survive. About a 16th birthday party getting canceled for a kid who had never been prioritized once in his life. The callousness was so stark when you saw it spelled out in black and white. Someone in the comments did the math on travel baseball costs. They estimated that my parents spent somewhere between $15,000 and $25,000 per year on Gavin's baseball career over a period of roughly 10 years. Meanwhile, I had paid my own way through college on scholarships and part-time jobs because they told me they could not afford to help. Could not afford to help me, while simultaneously dropping enough money on one kid's sports career to buy a decent house. My mom tried to do damage control. She posted a follow-up saying that Jamie was exaggerating, that they always did something special for my birthdays, that I was being dramatic and ungrateful. But the screenshots spoke for themselves. The receipts were right there in black and white. A few of her friends tried to defend her. They said things like, "Every family has favorites, that does not make it abuse," and "maybe Ethan should have spoken up if he was so unhappy." Those comments got ratioed into oblivion by strangers pointing out that I had spoken up repeatedly and nobody listened. Then more people started coming forward. A former neighbor who remembered me sitting alone in the backyard during my own supposed birthday parties. A high school friend who remembered the party cancellation. A teacher who remembered writing my college recommendation letter because she knew my parents were not going to prioritize it. My high school friend posted her own recollection of the 16th birthday disaster. She wrote about getting the call from me canceling the party and hearing how defeated I sounded. She wrote about asking her mom if maybe I could stay with them that weekend instead of going to Georgia, and her mom calling my parents to offer. She wrote about my mom declining the offer and saying, "Ethan needs to learn that family comes first. Family comes first. Unless that family member is Ethan, then travel baseball comes first." The court of public opinion started to shift. My family went from sympathetic victims to villains in a story they had written themselves. I finally listened to the voicemails. There were 23 of them. My mom's ranged from tearful, "Please call me, I am your mother, I love you," to angry, "I cannot believe you would humiliate me like this," to manipulative, "Your father has not been sleeping, his blood pressure is up, I hope you are happy." My dad left exactly one voicemail. His voice was tight and controlled, the same voice he used when I did something that embarrassed him in front of the travel ball parents. "I do not know what we did to deserve this, Ethan, but you have really hurt your mother. This family has given you everything. I thought we raised you better than this. Call me back. Everything. They had given me everything, except attention, except presence, except the basic acknowledgement that I existed outside of being Gavin's older brother." Gavin left a few voicemails too. His were mostly just anger. "Dude, what is your problem? Mom has been crying for like a week straight. You made me look like garbage in front of everyone. We are supposed to be family. You cannot just cut us out because of some childhood stuff. Grow up." Childhood stuff. 18 years of being invisible was just childhood stuff. I did not call any of them back. About a month after the wedding went viral, I got a letter in the mail, hand-addressed in my mom's handwriting, sent to my work address, which meant she had to do some research to find it since I had never given it to them. I thought about throwing it away unopened, but curiosity got the better of me. The letter was 4 pages long, single-spaced, written on that floral stationery my mom has had since I was a kid. She started with an apology, or at least what she thought was an apology. "I am sorry if you felt overlooked as a child. We never meant to make you feel that way. We were just trying to support your brother's dreams. If I felt overlooked, not, 'I am sorry we overlooked you,' not, 'I am sorry we canceled your birthdays.' Just sorry that I felt a way about the things they actually did." She went on to explain that they had invested in Gavin because he had special talents that needed nurturing. She said I was always the independent one who did not need as much attention. She said she assumed I understood that Gavin's baseball career was a family priority and that I would benefit too when he made it to the majors. When, not if. She still believed the fantasy even now that it was long dead. She talked about how hurt she was that I had not invited them to the wedding, how she had always dreamed of watching me get married, how she had been robbed of that experience. Robbed. Like I had taken something from her. Like my wedding was her property that I had selfishly withheld. She ended the letter by saying she hoped we could put this behind us and move forward as a family. She said she would always love me no matter what. She signed it Mom with a little heart. I read the letter twice. Then I put it back in the envelope. Then I recycled it. There was nothing in those 4 pages that sounded like genuine accountability. No acknowledgement of specific harms. No understanding of why I might be upset. Just excuses wrapped in the language of victimhood. I showed the letter to Olivia. She read it slowly, then set it down and said, "This is genuinely one of the most tone-deaf things I have ever read." She spent 4 pages explaining why the way they treated you was justified. She was right. My parents had decided early on that Gavin's talents were worth investing in, and mine were not. They had made that choice deliberately, over and over again, for 18 years. And now they expected me to just get over it because they finally noticed I was gone. I did not write back. My mom did not deserve a response. She did not deserve anything from me except exactly what she had given me for 18 years. Nothing. I was not going to move forward as a family with people who still did not understand what they had done. About 3 months after the wedding went viral, I got a call from my cousin Jamie. Her voice was tense. "Heads up," she said. "Your parents are planning to come to North Carolina. They booked flights for next weekend. Your mom told my mom they are going to show up at your house and make you talk to them." I felt my jaw tighten. How did they get my address? Your Aunt Linda. She found it on some property records website. I am so sorry. I tried to warn her not to give it to them, but she thinks this whole situation is sad and everyone should just make up. I thanked Jamie for the heads up and hung up. Then I called Olivia and told her what was happening. "So they are just going to ambush us?" she said. "Show up unannounced at our home?" "Apparently. That is insane. What do you want to do?" I thought about it for a few seconds. "I want to not be here when they arrive." So that is exactly what we did. The weekend my parents flew to North Carolina, Olivia and I drove to Charleston for a spontaneous beach trip. We turned off our phones and spent 3 days eating seafood and walking on the beach and completely ignoring whatever chaos was happening back home. When we got back Sunday night, there was a note taped to our front door. My mom's handwriting. "We came all this way to see you. We sat on your porch for 4 hours waiting. Please call us. We love you, and we want to fix this." There was also a gift bag with a card and what looked like a framed photo inside. I did not open it. I threw the whole thing in the trash. 2 days later, my dad called from a number I did not recognize. I made the mistake of answering. "Ethan, this is ridiculous," he said. His voice was hard and angry. "We flew across the country to see you, and you hid from us like a child. Your mother cried the entire flight home. Are you happy?" "I did not ask you to come," I said. "I did not want you to come. You showed up uninvited at my home. We are your parents. We do not need an invitation. Actually, you do. That is exactly how this works." He sputtered for a few seconds. "I do not know what we did to make you hate us so much. I know you do not. That is the problem." I hung up and blocked that number too. A few weeks after the ambush attempt, I got some big news at work. The firm was promoting me to director. It was a significant jump in title and salary. They told me I had earned it through years of consistent, excellent work and strong client relationships. Olivia insisted we celebrate. She organized a dinner at a nice restaurant with about a dozen of our closest friends. Her parents drove down from Virginia to join us. Jake flew in from Atlanta. My cousin Jamie came too. During dinner, Olivia's dad stood up and gave a toast. He talked about how proud he was of me, how hard I had worked, how much I deserved this recognition. He said he considered me a son, and that watching me succeed brought him genuine joy. I looked around the table at all these people who had shown up for me, who had driven hours or flown across states to celebrate my promotion. My actual parents had never once done anything like this for any of my achievements. After dinner, Olivia's mom pulled me aside and handed me a small wrapped box. "This is from us," she said, "for your promotion, but also just because we wanted you to have it." Inside was a really nice watch. Quality. Elegant. The kind of thing you wear to important meetings. "You do not have to say anything," she said when I started to thank her. "Just know that we see you. We have always seen you." Fast forward to now. It has been almost a year since the wedding went viral. My parents made 2 more attempts at contact after the ambush. First, they sent a certified letter to my office demanding a meeting. My assistant signed for it. I had our company lawyer send back a formal response requesting they cease all contact through my workplace. That stopped pretty quickly. Second, they tried going through Olivia's parents. My mom somehow got their phone number and called them to plead her case. Olivia's mom listened politely for about 5 minutes, then said, "With all due respect, I have heard your son's side of this story, and I believe him. If you want a relationship with him, you will need to earn it. Calling us is not the way to do that." Then she hung up. I heard about that conversation secondhand and laughed out loud. Olivia's mom is tiny, but she does not take nonsense from anyone. Gavin reached out once through Instagram DMs about 6 months ago. He said he missed his brother and wanted to meet up. I looked at his profile. He was still living at home with our parents, still working part-time at the sporting goods store. I did not respond. Meanwhile, my life just kept getting better. Olivia and I bought a house, a craftsman bungalow with a big yard and a front porch. We got a dog named Hank, who is the goofiest golden retriever you have ever seen. We started talking about maybe having kids in the next couple years. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel and help us bring you more and better stories. Thanks. Hold on. Before I start this one, I need you to sit down. What you're about to hear is the story of a kid whose parents gave his twin brother, his 15-year-old twin brother, full control over what he was allowed to eat. Every meal, every snack, every single day for 14 months. Nobody stopped it until this kid collapsed in a school cafeteria weighing 109 pounds. His own family turned food into a weapon and handed the trigger to a teenager. What happened after that collapse? Justice. Real, ugly, court-documented justice. And honestly, this guy handled it with more composure at 15 than most grown men would at 40. Let's get into it. My parents let my twin brother decide what I could eat. For 14 months, he starved me. Then the school nurse made one phone call and my whole family went down. I woke up on the cafeteria floor with the school nurse, Mrs. Ortiz, kneeling over me asking if I could hear her. My vision was blurry around the edges, and my mouth tasted like pennies. The lights above were way too bright, making my head pound in rhythm with my heartbeat. She was holding my wrist, checking my pulse, and I could see her lips moving, but the words took a couple seconds to actually register. "Nate, can you tell me when you last ate?" Should have been a simple question. It wasn't. Breakfast had been half a piece of dry toast, because Kyle said I'd been looking bloated and needed to cut back on carbs. Lunch was supposed to be in 10 minutes, but I'd have to show Kyle my tray first, and he'd decide what I could actually eat. That's how it had worked for the past 14 months. Ever since my parents set up what they called the meal approval system, after I supposedly ate Kyle's birthday cake slice without permission. I'd been a normal 15-year-old kid before the rule started. 5'9", 153 pounds, on the JV soccer team with a decent shot at varsity next year. I was identical to Kyle in almost every way. Same dark hair, green eyes, same lean build, same face that made people do double takes when they saw us together. We'd spent our whole lives being compared and treated like a match set, but that was before our parents decided Kyle's judgment about food was more reliable than mine. Before they gave him complete control over what I could eat each day, portion by portion, meal by meal. Before I started disappearing inside my own body, while my twin decided whether I deserved protein or vegetables or anything more than whatever scraps he felt like approving. Mrs. Ortiz helped me sit up, and I saw the crowd of students that had gathered, phones out, filming my collapse like it was content. She waved them off and called for the vice principal. My hands were shaking, which had become normal lately. Low blood sugar, probably. Kyle had approved oatmeal for breakfast yesterday, but only 3 spoonfuls because he said I hadn't done enough chores to earn a full bowl. Dinner the night before had been plain salad. No dressing, no protein, because apparently I'd been rude to him and needed to learn respect. The system my parents created meant every meal required Kyle's approval, and his approval came with conditions, restrictions, and punishments that had nothing to do with nutrition and everything to do with power. Mrs. Ortiz took my blood pressure and frowned. She asked again when I'd last eaten a full meal. I couldn't remember. Maybe 3 days ago. Maybe longer. Time had started blurring together, and I'd stopped keeping track of things like adequate calories. Those concepts belonged to a different version of my life. She told me to stay put while she made a phone call. I heard her say words like severely underweight and possible malnutrition, and need immediate evaluation. The backstory was almost boring in how stupid it was. 14 months earlier, my parents threw a birthday party for Kyle and me. We'd turned 14. Mom ordered this fancy cake from an expensive bakery, chocolate with raspberry filling and cream cheese frosting. The party was mostly Kyle's friends because he was more social. The twin everyone gravitated toward, while I was quieter and less interesting. At some point during the party, a slice went missing. Kyle's slice specifically, the corner piece he'd claimed before the official cutting. He'd set it aside to eat later, and when he went back for it, the plate was empty. He immediately accused me, said I ate his special piece because I was jealous the party was really more his than mine. I hadn't eaten the cake. I'd been outside playing soccer with some kids when it disappeared. But Kyle was convinced, and when he told our parents, they believed him instantly. Mom looked at me with this disappointed face and asked why I couldn't just let my brother have one thing. Dad lectured me about respect and boundaries, how eating Kyle's cake showed a fundamental problem with my impulse control. Didn't matter how much I said I hadn't touched it. Their minds were made up. The punishment they invented was creative in the worst possible way. Since I apparently couldn't be trusted around food, since I had poor judgment about what belonged to me, Kyle would approve all my meals going forward. Just until I learned self-control. Just until I could be trusted again. That had been 14 months ago. The temporary punishment became permanent, then expanded, then weaponized. Kyle started small, checking my school lunch to make sure I hadn't packed anything he thought I didn't deserve. Then it grew to approving breakfast, then dinner, then snacks, then controlling not just what I ate, but how much, when, and under what conditions. Here's what a typical day looked like by month 8 or 9. I'd wake up and go downstairs. Kyle would already be eating whatever he wanted. Cereal, eggs, toast, juice. I'd stand there and wait. He'd look at my homework from the night before. If he decided I'd done a good enough job, I'd get oatmeal. Plain. Measured out by him. If he was in a bad mood or I'd annoyed him the day before, I'd get nothing. Just water. Then at school, I'd have to find him before lunch and show him my tray. He'd remove things. The chicken? Nah, too much protein, you haven't earned it. The roll? No carbs today. Sometimes I'd end up eating just a side salad and an apple. Sometimes less. Dinner was the same routine. He'd tell our parents what I was allowed to have, and they'd plate it accordingly. Like it was normal. Like this was just how our house worked. I remember one Thursday. It was a Thursday because we had soccer practice that afternoon, and I almost passed out during sprints. Kyle had restricted me to vegetables only for the entire week because I'd left a dish in the sink overnight. 5 days of raw vegetables and the occasional handful of plain rice. I was running drills at practice, and my legs just gave out underneath me. Coach asked if I was okay, and I said I'd skipped lunch, which was technically true. I just didn't mention the part where my brother had decided I didn't get one. My parents enabled every single escalation, praising Kyle for taking his responsibility seriously, for helping me learn discipline. Mom would say things like, "Kyle's really stepped up at dinner," while I sat there with a plate of plain lettuce. Dad would nod approvingly. They ignored every sign, every pound I lost, every time I asked for more food and got told I was being dramatic. Yo, time out. I need everybody to understand what just happened here. These parents, actual adult human beings, looked at a missing slice of birthday cake and went, "You know what the appropriate response is? Let's give our other 14-year-old son complete dictatorial control over his twin's food supply. Indefinitely." That's not parenting. That's a psychological experiment you'd get kicked out of a university for proposing. This is like if the warden from Shawshank Redemption had a kid and said, "Let me try this at home." And the kid was 14. They handed a teenager the keys to another human being's survival and called it a learning opportunity. Buckle up because this ride only goes downhill from here. Mrs. Ortiz came back with the vice principal, Mr. Donnelly, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses who looked genuinely concerned. They walked me to the nurse's office, one on each side like I might drop again. She had me stand on a scale and I watched the digital numbers settle at 109 pounds. I'd lost 44 pounds in 14 months. She measured my height, still 5'9", and I saw her calculate my BMI on her computer. Her face went pale. "Nate, I'm calling your parents, and I'm also calling your pediatrician. This is a medical emergency." The words hit hard. Emergency meant hospital. Hospital meant Kyle's system getting exposed. My phone buzzed, and I knew without looking it was Kyle. He always knew when something was happening with me. 3 texts. "Why weren't you in English?" Someone said you passed out in the cafeteria. You better not be making a scene. Mom and Dad are going to be angry if you're being dramatic again. I put the phone face down on the table and felt my hands shaking harder. Mrs. Ortiz noticed and brought me a juice box and a granola bar. I opened the granola bar but hesitated before taking a bite. Kyle hadn't approved this. He'd specifically said no sugary snacks this week because I'd gotten a B on a math test. Eating without permission meant consequences. Mrs. Ortiz saw me hesitate, and her expression shifted to something between confusion and alarm. She told me to eat it right now, her voice sharp. I took a bite, and the sweetness was almost overwhelming after days of bland, restricted portions. My stomach cramped immediately, not used to actual food. She asked about my comment. Apparently, I'd said something out loud about checking with my brother first. I hadn't realized I'd said it. The words just slipped out. I wanted to lie, protect the secret that had become my entire existence. But I was so tired of being hungry, of calculating every bite, of living in fear of Kyle's approval. My parents let Kyle decide what I can eat. It started as a punishment 14 months ago. It never stopped. Mrs. Ortiz's face went through several expressions before landing on professional concern. She closed her office door, sat across from me, and said something nobody had ever said to me before. Nate, what you're describing is abuse. What your parents are doing is neglect. What your brother is doing is controlling and harmful. This isn't discipline. This is systematic starvation by someone who has no medical training and no right to make these decisions. I'd never heard it put that plainly. Abuse, neglect, starvation. The words made it real, in a way it hadn't been when it was just my daily life. She told me she was legally required to report it, that she was calling Child Protective Services right now. Hold on a second. For the listeners, this is me, not Nate. This kid hesitated to eat a granola bar during a medical emergency because his brother hadn't approved it. His body is literally shutting down, and his first instinct is still to follow the rules his 15-year-old twin set up. That's not discipline. That's programming. Kyle didn't just control Nate's food. He rewired this kid's survival instincts, turned basic hunger into a permission slip. And the parents watched this happen for over a year and said, yeah, Kyle's doing great. If bad parenting was a video game, these two just unlocked the final boss. Anyway, Mom shows up next, and she makes it worse. The call to my parents went about how I expected. Mom arrived 30 minutes later in her real estate clothes, looking annoyed at being pulled from work. She came in already defensive, asking what stories I'd been making up now, saying I'd always been dramatic when I wanted attention. Mrs. Ortiz stood up and laid it out. Your son collapsed from what appears to be severe malnutrition. His BMI is critically low. He's lost over 40 pounds in the past year. This isn't dramatic. This is a medical crisis. Mom's face went red. She insisted I ate plenty, said I'd just been exercising more, getting healthy, that Kyle had been helping me make better food choices. Mrs. Ortiz pulled out a chart she'd been compiling, growth measurements from my annual school physicals going back 5 years, steady growth through middle school, then a sharp cliff starting exactly 14 months ago. This isn't healthy weight loss. This is starvation. Mom's expression shifted from annoyed to defensive to something that looked almost like fear. But she doubled down. Said Kyle was responsible and had excellent self-control. That they trusted his assessment of what I needed. My pediatrician, Dr. Kessler, arrived an hour later. She'd been my doctor since I was 3. A calm woman with silver-streaked hair who'd given me every vaccine and treated every childhood illness with patient efficiency. She took one look at me and her professional mask cracked. She did a quick exam right there in the nurse's office. Heart rate, blood pressure, skin, nails, hair. Each observation made her expression darker. She turned to my mother and told her to take me to the hospital immediately, that she was concerned about organ damage. Mom crossed her arms and said everyone was overreacting. Dr. Kessler pulled up my growth chart on her tablet. 5 years of checkups showing normal, consistent weight through age 13, then a straight drop starting 14 months ago. She zoomed in. His last recorded visit was 13 months ago at 151 pounds. Perfectly healthy. Now he's 109. That's a 28% loss of body weight. In medical terms, that's starvation. Mom's face had gone from defensive to white. But Kyle said Nate needed to cut back. He said Nate was eating too much. Dr. Kessler's expression went hard. Kyle is a 15-year-old child with no medical training. He's not qualified to make nutritional assessments for anyone. What you've allowed to happen borders on criminal neglect. Wait. Let me jump in. The mother just watched a doctor explain her son is being starved to death, and her response was, "But Kyle said he needed to cut back." Ma'am, Kyle is 15. He can't drive a car, vote, or buy a rated R movie ticket, but you gave him authority over another human being's caloric intake? That's like putting a toddler in charge of air traffic control and blaming the planes when they crash. And she canceled medical checkups, so no doctor would notice. That's not ignorance. That's a cover-up. The mom from Matilda is watching this like, even I wouldn't do that. Popcorn ready because CPS is about to walk through that door. The CPS worker arrived at 2:47. A woman named Linda Torres, who'd been doing child welfare investigations for 11 years. She pulled me into a private room and asked me to tell her everything from the beginning. I walked her through all of it. The birthday cake, the initial punishment, how it escalated over 14 months, Kyle's rules. No breakfast without completing all homework first. No lunch without Kyle approving my outfit that morning. No dinner without finishing all chores to his satisfaction. No snacks unless I'd earned them through good behavior, which was defined entirely by whatever mood Kyle happened to be in. I told her about the portions getting smaller, the rules getting stricter, how Kyle started denying me protein because he said I didn't need to build muscle, how he'd restricted me to mostly vegetables and occasional grains, how some days I got nothing because I disappointed him in some vague way I couldn't even identify. Linda took notes in a leather-bound notebook. When I finished, she asked one question that broke something open inside me. "Nate, do your parents know the full extent of what Kyle has been doing?" I thought about it honestly. I think they know I'm hungry. But they see it as Kyle being responsible, as me learning a lesson. When I try to tell them I'm starving, they say I'm being dramatic, that Kyle knows best. She closed her notebook and looked at me directly. "Nate, I'm placing you in emergency protective custody, as of right now. You won't be going home tonight." The relief was so intense it made me dizzy. Not going home. Not facing Kyle. Not having to ask permission for dinner. I sat there in that little conference room and felt something I hadn't felt in over a year. Like maybe things could actually get better. It sounds dumb saying it now, but when you've been inside something that bad for that long, you forget that getting out is even an option. Your world shrinks down to just surviving the next meal decision. The hospital was a blur of tests and concerned faces. They drew blood, took x-rays, did an EKG to check my heart. Each test revealed more damage. Blood work showed anemia, vitamin deficiencies, electrolyte imbalances. X-rays showed decreased bone density for my age. The EKG showed an irregular heartbeat, consistent with malnutrition. Dr. Kessler compiled everything into a report for CPS and the district attorney's office. "Nate, your body is eating itself to survive. Your muscle mass is depleted, your bone density is that of someone much older, and your organs are under severe stress. If this had continued much longer, you could have had heart failure or kidney damage. You could have died." The words should have scared me, but I mostly felt numb. I'd been dying for 14 months, just slowly enough that I hadn't realized it was happening. They admitted me for 3 days of nutritional rehabilitation. Refeeding someone who's been starved requires careful supervision. Introducing food too quickly can cause dangerous electrolyte shifts that can actually be fatal. So they put me on a controlled meal plan, small portions every few hours, each one monitored by nurses who documented what I ate and how my body responded. The first real meal I had without Kyle's approval was chicken broth and crackers, and I cried while eating it because nobody told me I couldn't. The nurse on duty, a young guy named Joel, sat with me and let me cry without asking questions. Later, he told me he'd worked in the pediatric unit for 6 years and had seen his share of bad situations. But something about mine hit different. Brothers aren't supposed to do that to each other, he said, and parents aren't supposed to let it happen. My parents tried to visit on the second day. Hospital security stopped them. Linda had put a protection order in place. I watched from my window as they argued with the security guard in the parking lot. Mom gesturing angrily, Dad on his phone probably calling lawyers. Kyle wasn't with them, and I wondered what he was thinking. Whether he felt guilty or justified or nothing at all. My phone had been taken by CPS as evidence. All the texts from Kyle documenting his control. All the conversations where he denied me food or set impossible conditions for earning meals. Linda said the messages alone were damning. Okay, stop. This detail is wild. CPS took Nate's phone as evidence, right? But Kyle also kept his own records. A whole notebook. Handwritten. Every meal approved or denied. Every punishment. Every restriction. Dated and detailed. This kid was running a dictatorship and journaling about it like a Bond villain with a day planner. October 22nd, Nate complained about being hungry, added 2 additional days to restriction as consequence for whining. B-row. You wrote that down in your own handwriting and handed it to investigators. That's not a confession. That's a resume for a job nobody's hiring for. If self-incrimination was an art form, Kyle just painted the Mona Lisa and signed it. Moving on. Linda also interviewed Kyle. According to her notes, he'd shown zero remorse. Defended every decision. Insisted I'd needed strict control because I was impulsive and undisciplined. His notebook, that handwritten record of every meal he'd approved or denied, was entered as evidence. Dr. Kessler submitted her medical report to CPS and copied the district attorney's office. She'd consulted with a pediatric nutritionist, Dr. Yuki Tanaka, who reviewed my case and confirmed that no reasonable person with access to food would lose that much weight voluntarily. Dr. Tanaka estimated I'd been consuming somewhere between 800 and 1,200 calories daily, less than half what a growing teenage boy needs. She'd written in her supplemental report that the level of restriction over 14 months constituted torture. Criminal charges came 6 weeks after my collapse. The district attorney, Patricia Landry, filed charges against both my parents. Dad, Gerald Holloway, got 2 counts of child endangerment and 1 count of criminal neglect. Mom, Diane Holloway, got the same, plus an additional count of failure to protect. Up to 5 years each. Kyle was charged in juvenile court with assault and battery, the legal theory being that systematic starvation constituted physical harm. The family CPS placed me with was a couple in their 40s named Greg and Wendy Carter, who'd been taking in teenagers for 8 years. They lived in a quiet neighborhood 30 minutes from my school, in a house that smelled like cooking and had a kitchen I could access whenever I wanted. Wendy sat me down the first night and explained their one rule about food. There were no rules about food. The fridge and pantry were open to me at all hours. I was supposed to eat when I was hungry and stop when I was full. That first week was surreal. I kept hovering near the kitchen during meals, waiting for permission that didn't need to be asked. Wendy started leaving sticky notes on the fridge. You don't need approval. Food isn't conditional. Trust your hunger. Greg, who worked from home as an accountant, would check in periodically. Not controlling, just concerned. It felt foreign after months of Kyle's regime. Actually, back up. I forgot to mention this part. My best friend Becca was the only person I'd texted from Wendy's phone during that first week. She'd heard rumors and showed up the next day with flowers and a container of homemade cookies. Said she'd known something was wrong, that I kept getting thinner and Kyle kept making weird comments about my diet. She should have said something sooner. I told her it wasn't her fault. Nobody expects a family to do what mine did. The trial was smaller than I expected. Wood-paneled courtroom, formal, but not huge. My parents sat with their attorney, Richard Greenfield, some polished guy who'd built a career defending wealthy clients. Kyle sat separately with a court-appointed attorney who looked uncomfortable with her own client. Patricia called me to testify and my hands were shaking so bad I had to grip the railing. She walked me through everything chronologically. The cake, the punishment, the escalation, the specific rules, the physical effects. I answered every question directly. Greenfield's cross-examination tried to suggest I had an eating disorder, that I was attention-seeking, that Kyle was just trying to help me eat healthier. I shut each one down. Multiple doctors had evaluated me. No eating disorder. Weight loss entirely from external restriction. Dr. Kessler testified next and demolished the defense. Growth charts, blood work, bone density scans. She stated flat out that my condition was not self-inflicted. Greenfield tried arguing teenagers sometimes lose weight during growth spurts. Dr. Kessler didn't even blink. Growth spurts involve increased height, not decreased weight. Nate's height stayed the same while his weight plummeted. That's not development. That's starvation. Linda testified about the investigation. and presented Kyle's notebook. She read entries aloud. August 15th, Nate was mouthy at breakfast, denied lunch. September 3rd, Nate got a B on his history test, restricted to vegetables only for 3 days. October 22nd, Nate complained about hunger, added 2 additional days to restriction. Each entry timestamped in Kyle's own handwriting. The defense tried arguing Kyle acted under parental authority. The prosecution countered with evidence that my parents had actively enabled it, canceled medical appointments to hide the weight loss, emails between them discussing my dramatic complaints about hunger, texts praising Kyle's discipline, and telling him to ignore my protests. Patricia read one email exchange between my parents out loud. Mom had written, "Nate's complaining again about portions," and Dad had responded, "Trust Kyle's judgment. He knows what Nate needs better than Nate does. The boy needs to stop fighting the system." The jury shifted in their seats when they heard that one. The prosecution's closing argument was sharp. Patricia stood in front of the jury and said these parents didn't accidentally neglect their son. They built a system of control, delegated it to a child, and then actively covered it up by canceling medical appointments and dismissing every warning sign. Nate lost 44 pounds. His heart was failing. His bones were deteriorating. And his parents' response to every cry for help was, "Trust Kyle." That's not a mistake. That's a choice they made every single day for 14 months. The jury deliberated 7 hours. When they came back, the verdict was read with a steady voice that filled the courtroom. Dad, guilty on all counts. Mom, guilty on all counts. Mom started sobbing. Dad sat there stone-faced. Kyle looked confused, like he genuinely couldn't understand why everyone was treating this as serious. Hold on. For the listeners, this is me one last time. I need to talk about Kyle's face when the verdicts dropped. Confused. Not scared, not guilty, not sorry. Confused. Like somebody told him water is wet and he's processing it. This kid documented 14 months of starving his twin, watched his brother collapse at 109 pounds, showed zero remorse to investigators, and when the jury said guilty, he looked around like, wait, I'm the bad guy? That's a kid who genuinely believed he had the right to control another human being's survival and is now experiencing the novel sensation of someone telling him no. Anyway, sentencing. And the judge was not playing. Sentencing came 6 weeks later. Judge Margaret Olson, 20 years on the bench, zero patience, handed down sentences harsher than even the prosecution had requested. Dad got 4 years in state prison. Mom got 5, due to her additional failure to protect charge. Both would complete mandatory parenting classes during incarceration. Upon release, 5 years probation, with no contact with me, unless I initiated it. Both placed on the state child abuse registry permanently. Judge Olson's voice was cold. You were entrusted with the care and protection of your children. You failed catastrophically, enabling one child to torture another for over a year. The harm you've caused is profound and potentially permanent. Kyle's juvenile case resulted in 18 months in a juvenile detention facility. His attorney argued for probation and community service, but the judge reviewed the evidence and determined detention was necessary. Kyle would finish high school through the facility's education program and carry a juvenile record. I wrote my own victim impact statement. Read it aloud in court while my parents sat avoiding my eyes. I told them about the days I'd been so hungry I couldn't think straight in class. The nights lying awake with my stomach cramping, staring at the ceiling wondering if this was just my life now. The moment I realized my own family valued Kyle's control more than my survival. I told them they'd broken something fundamental, that I'd never trust the same way again. Final update. Physical recovery took about 18 months of careful nutritional rehab and medical monitoring. Dr. Kessler tracked my weight gain, celebrating each pound. I eventually stabilized around 155, close to my pre-starvation weight, but with composition changes that reflected the damage. Bone density improved but never fully recovered, meaning I'd deal with higher fracture risks for the rest of my life. My heart healed from the irregular rhythms, but Dr. Kessler warned me I'd need cardiac monitoring every couple years going forward. The physical scars were permanent, written into my body. The Carters officially adopted me 6 months after my removal, gave me stability, and a family that didn't make love conditional on obedience. Wendy taught me to cook, helped me rebuild a normal relationship with food, and relearn what hunger and fullness actually felt like without fear attached. Greg helped me prep for the SATs and supported my college applications. They showed me what healthy parenting looked like. It was the first time I'd seen it up close. The thing nobody tells you about recovering from something like this is how weird normal feels. For months, I couldn't sit down to eat without this knot in my stomach, waiting for someone to tell me I hadn't earned it. I'd open the fridge at midnight for a glass of water and freeze up, half expecting Kyle's voice to come from behind me asking what I thought I was doing. Wendy found me once standing in front of the open pantry at 2 in the morning, just staring at the food. Not eating, just making sure it was still there. She didn't say anything, just made me a sandwich and sat with me at the kitchen table while I ate it. I finished high school at a different school near the Carter's house. Fresh start where nobody knew my history. Made the varsity soccer team junior year, which felt like getting back a piece of myself that Kyle had taken. I wasn't the same player I'd been. My stamina was lower, my bones ached in ways they shouldn't at 16. But I was out there, running, eating whatever I wanted for dinner after practice. Nobody standing over my plate deciding if I'd been good enough. Went to a state university 4 hours away studying criminal justice. Actually, wait, I think I declared that sophomore year. Freshman year, I was undecided. Whatever, doesn't matter. I wanted to understand how the legal system could better protect kids in situations like mine. Graduated with honors. I never reconciled with my parents. They served their sentences and moved to a different state where nobody knew them. They sent letters occasionally, awkward attempts at connection that always avoided taking actual responsibility. I read them once each and filed them away. Not angry anymore, just not interested in pretending we could rebuild something that had been fundamentally broken. Some relationships don't deserve saving. The parent-child bond isn't sacred if the parents failed their most basic duty. Kyle tried reaching out years later. Sent an email through a mutual contact saying he finally understood the full impact of what he'd done. Said he was sorry, that sorry wasn't enough, but he wanted me to know. I read the email 3 times and deleted it without responding. I'd stopped needing his acknowledgement a long time ago. His apology felt more about his need for redemption than my need for closure. Some wounds heal without requiring the person who caused them to participate. I'd built a life that was mine, shaped by my choices, not their restrictions. And I decided a while back that's enough. One thing I still think about sometimes is that birthday cake, the slice that disappeared and started everything. I never found out who actually ate it, whether Kyle took it himself and blamed me, or some random party guest grabbed it without realizing the consequences. The truth of that initial incident mattered less than what my parents did in response. Even if I had eaten that cake, no punishment should give a teenager absolute power over his siblings' nutrition. No discipline should risk permanent physical damage or death. The most unfair punishment I ever got was my parents letting my twin decide what I was allowed to eat. 14 months of systematic starvation that permanently damaged my body. But I survived it, exposed it, and made sure the people responsible answered for every single day of it. So, what's the most unfair punishment you ever got growing up? Drop it in the comments. I'm genuinely curious. Look, I'm not going to sugarcoat this one. A kid lost 44 pounds because his parents decided a 15-year-old was qualified to run a nutrition program. When every warning sign was screaming in their face, they doubled down. Praised Kyle. Canceled appointments. Called their starving son dramatic. But here's what I respect about Nate. He didn't beg. He didn't try to win them back. He testified, watched the verdicts come in, and built a life without looking over his shoulder. Deleted Kyle's apology email without blinking. That's a man who knows what he's worth. Drop your thoughts below. What would you have done? And if you're not subscribed, hit that button so you don't miss the next one.